Here is the multi-hour special. Will do one shot soon and the next multi-hour special will be at 100 subscribers. Ghost and Michiru came to stumbling halt in the middle of the forest. Both trying to remain upright. My god. Ghost. That trick of yours is incredibly uncomfortable. Michiru muttered as she rubbed her chest absently. Where the attack had hit her. Ghost groaned and steadied himself. Yeah, that is the downside. But you get used to it eventually. Michiru looked back to where she presumably thought the direction of the village was. That was one heck of a fight. Ghost grinned at her but quickly turned into a grimace. Yeah. It was a good one. All right. The blonde turned back to her partner. Let me take a look at your dressing. She lifted his shirt and noticed it was dark red. You really need to slow it down. Ghost. Sit down. Let me take a look at it. Ghost merely nodded. Exhaustion started to creep in. Not only physically, but mentally as well. The reunion with his old friends had been nothing, if not taxing. Despite the fact that they were a severe nuisance, he kept his focus on the task at hand and had completed it. Even if he needed help in the end. 2 unknowns. With one being merged as well, we got lucky. He watched silently as Michiru slowly pulled off his bandages and replaced it with new ones. He glanced down at his wound before letting out a grimace. I can't believe he threw my own blade at me. Michiru chuckled. Well, in all fairness, you did throw it first. You realize you got Konaha and Shuriken for that, right? Ghost shrugged, which resulted in a hiss. It worked. So I guess I can't complain. Michiru tied the dressing off and lowered his shirt. Her eyes wandered to the rest of his chest, which had a small amount of scars blemishing his otherwise smooth and toned upper body. With a shake of her head she slowly stood up and held out her hand. To help him up. Ghost hesitated but decided he could do it himself and stood up. All right. Let's get going. I don't have the energy for another flash step. So we have to do it the old-fashioned way. I think I prefer that. So a win-win for me. She raised an eyebrow. Having trouble understanding why he behaved as he did. You don't have to everything by yourself. You know that, right? Ghost purposefully avoided her gaze and instead looked at their route ahead. I don't need any help. Everyone needs help from time to time. Ghost. There's nothing wrong with that. Needing help is a weakness I don't need. Let's go. And with that he had ended the conversation. He hopped onto the nearest branch and started picking up speed. She looked at his retreating back. Unsure what had caused his lone wolf attitude. They traversed through Hinokuni at a relative comfortable pace. Lacking a reason to make haste. For the most part they kept to themselves, with Ghost letting his mind wander to the events that had taken last couple of days. Considering all that had happened, he had to say that it could have ended a lot worse. I didn't kill any of them Konaha dogs, I guess that's a win. The downside was that it had been messing with his head. Because despite all that they had done to him, they used to be his friends at one point. It wasn't easy to downplay that. Not that it was that hard either. Fuck them. I did what Maya wanted to do and I can finally close that chapter. He looked at the setting sun and looked at Michiru. Want to call it a day and set up camp? Michiru snapped out of her thoughts. Yeah. I'm getting hungry. Ghost hopped down and landed in a small clearing. He reached for the scroll containing a reserve sleeping bag along with some spare food. An extra set of clothing and a spare backpack. I guess it's a good thing we decided on bringing extras. Michiru grinned at him. Well. I kind of expected we would be leaving Konaha with them snapping their teeth at us. Ghost nodded. I never really thought to bring our backpacks with us into the arena. But then again, that could have raised some serious questions. Michiru started preparing some food while Ghost scouted around, making sure they weren't followed. She had to admit that she was happy with her first fight against an unknown. Sure, SIA had been weakened beforehand, but she hadn't been dead weight. I honestly didn't expect Konaha to listen to me. I thought they would jump after Ghost. She heard footsteps approaching and saw Ghost approaching, still wearing his ragged outfit. How about you? Eat some food and change into some new clothes. Ghost looked down at his outfit and chuckled. Yeah, I should definitely clean up. Let me do that first. Keep the food hot, okay? He then tore off his damaged outfit and threw it on a pile on the ground. Michiru focused her attention on the food and gave her teammate some privacy. Michiru. Wake up. Ghost hissed as he shook her. Huh? What's going on? She sleepily mumbled, rubbing her eyes trying to wake up. Hunternin are closing in and fast. Ghost said, causing the blonde to instantly snap awake. How long until they get here? She whispered, stuffing everything into her backpack. Give or take a minute. I had set up flares on the outer perimeter. But they'll be alerted as well. Michiru understood what he meant. Flares worked both ways. Neither of them were sensory types, so they had to use with the means available to them. We're probably screwed either way. But let's hide and hope for the best. Ghost quickly led her to a bush that had a fallen tree trunk beside it. Shortly after they had concealed themselves, a small group of 3 Hunternin landed in the clearing. Ghost glanced at Michiru, whom in return looked anxiously at her teammate as well. You can stand up now. We know you're hiding behind the tree trunk, a monotone voice spoke. Crap. Ghost muttered and stood up. He looked at the Hunternin and walked over. Michiru close behind. You're wanted by Konaha for crimes committed. We are ordered to apprehend and take you back to the village. Do you comply? Ghost rubbed his face in frustration. Are we seriously going to do this? We just saved your fucking village. Another Hunternin stepped forward. This time a female. You mutilated one of our own. Be happy we even take this approach in the first place. Ghost rolled his shoulder to see if his wound would hold together if it came to a fight. The stabbing pain was the answer to his question. They're still alive. Aren't they? They should have stayed out. Please decline our offer so I can tear you apart. She growled. She must be an Inyazuka. She's too emotional. He turned his focus to the Hunternin whom had spoken first. How did you know we were behind the tree? The man held out his hand and a lone bug flew out from underneath sleeve. Ah, someone from the Ibarame clan. How convenient for you. Ghost drawled before slipping his hand into his pouch. I take it? You're refusing our offer. Obviously. Your other friends can come out now. Can't we come to an agreement? Michiru interrupted as she stepped between Ghost and the group. 3 more Hunternin dropped from the trees. Last warning. We are ordered to take you alive if possible. But I honestly don't care if you don't surrender. A newcomer added in. Ghost got into an aggressive stance and Michiru followed suit. Michiru. You take the 2 on the left. I'll take the rest. She nodded and struck first, planting her left feet against the skull of her first target, snapping him away and through a tree. Ghost dashed forward, throwing a Konaha at their feet. An exploding tag attached to it. He used the chaos of the explosion to appear behind the Inyazuka and grabbed her by the back of her head, slamming it into a boulder to her left and finished with burst of chakra erupting from his hand that hit her point-blank range, crashing her into a teammate. Ghost was forced to dodge when a large beast came barging and tried to rip his leg off. How could I forget about the Inyazuka's mongrel? He used the same attack again. Chakra push, the dog got blasted after its owner. He noticed the Ibarame and he wasn't too worried about him. He knew that his attacks were chakra-based. And while his chakra reserves had severely diminished due to the events that had happened years ago, it had still left him with bigger than large reserves. He looked at Michiru's fight and she was doing all right on her own. He knew she was a Jonin-ranked shinobi in her own right. But she excelled at medical ninjutsu for the most part. She had an adequate amount of chakra reserves herself and she often combined that with her chakra-based attacks that originated from her home country. Mararka. The young hunter snapped his attention back to his opponents and noticed that 3 out of the 4 hunters had grouped up and were using a tight pack tactic. Perfect. His hands flurried about, creating a short string of hand seals. Katon, Hosenka no Jutsu, a volley of medium-sized fireballs were soaring towards the Hunternin. The back of his mind screamed for him to jump out of the way and he abruptly jerked to the side, letting his attacker fly past. But not before slashing his Konaha towards his exposed side. Ghost grimaced in pain, before flickering towards the Hunternin whom had created some more distance. Oh, you'll be wishing you hadn't done that. Ghost's hands flew upwards and his fingers intertwined behind the head of the Konaha shinobi. He pulled the man down and kneed him in the face. The mask of the hunter Ning got destroyed in one blow, revealing the face of Shino Abarame. The once wild-haired youngster had opted for a hairstyle that was much shorter. He lacked any sunglasses, but that was likely due to his affiliation to the Hunter Ning Corps. But Ghost didn't care if it was Shino or not. Once more clasping a hand behind the back of the hunter's head, he pulled him close. And with his other hand he rammed the kunao into the stomach of the Abarame with a sneer adorning his face. Watching his former friend drop to the ground, looking up, he noticed that two of his opponents were grouping up against Michiru. He also saw the Inyazuka girl once more charging at him with complete disregard of her unguarded posture. The dog was lagging behind and he decided he would strike first. He used flash step and grabbed her by the throat, using his armored hand, his claws digging into her skin before returning to his old spot, using the same technique. This is over. He gave a sharp whistle, causing all the shinobi in the clearing to give him their full attention. Glad you're paying attention, he shouted, squeezing harder. Having noticed the dog inching closer to his blind side, the beast backed off. This is your only warning. Leave now. I could have killed your team leader here, but I stayed my hand. The hunter Ning glanced at one another and hesitated, causing the former blonde to lose his patience. I won't tell you again, he shouted in anger. They reluctantly agreed. Please let us take our comrades home, so we can give them medical attention. Ghost stepped away from Shino and lowered the Inyazuka back to the ground, releasing the hold he had on her. The moment Shino is home, I'm going to hunt you down, she snarled at him, her beast mimicking his owner. Ghost smiled at her, placing a hand on her shoulder. No. You won't. He then slammed his feet into her lower leg, snapping the bone inside. The Inyazuka howled as she fell to the ground. Her beast instantly charged him and he slammed the dog into the ground. The remaining hunter Nin remained passive and obliged to Ghost's request. We'll remember this. Orodochi Ghost. Ghost turned his smile into a smirk. You're pathetic, he turned to Michiru and beckoned. Let's go. They won't bother us anymore. Michiru walked over and looked down at the woman twitching in pain on the ground. I'd listen to my teammate, if I were you. Ghost nodded at her and dashed away, with Michiru following in his footsteps. Michiru turned to Ghost. Was that really necessary? Of course it was. You were being surrounded by 4 of them. The alternative was me killing them both and then turning my focus on your opponents. Still, you were ruthless, she softly spoke. We are shinobi. It's our job to be ruthless. Ghost harshly answered. I'm not a shinobi. I'm a centurion, she corrected. Centurions are protectors of all innocence. She recited from an old book she had been given by Rome. Wake up. There aren't any centurions left. You and a couple of other hunters are the only ones remaining. Mararka is gone, he sighed and looked away, softening slightly. Look. This isn't your homeland. This is an entirely different world and you need to adjust to it. Michiru looked away. You shinobi need to show more compassion. Most of us do. They only forget what they are supposed to be. Maybe you should too, she said as she hopped onto a higher branch. When I met you, you weren't like this. We all have to grow up at some point. Ghost responded, glancing down at his gauntlet. They continued their trek towards Kawanu-kuni. They were almost crossing the border and that would mean that officially they would no longer be hunted by Konaha's hunter division. Not that it mattered all that much. He could handle them without too much trouble. Do you think the others won their fights? Ghost seemed to mull that over. It all depends. We fought 2 of them. I don't think they did that with all the other villages. I think that our 2 opponents were in sync with one another and that's the reason why. Our opponent also got merged. The others might have had more luck with that. Yeah. You're right. They should be all right. Ghost nodded before pointing ahead. There's the border. Let's use flash step so we don't run into any more trouble. Michiru looked apprehensive. Are you sure you can handle that? Ghost grinned. You just don't want to use flash step. Michiru merely pouted but stopped alongside Ghost and grabbed his arm. Fine. But if you start bleeding again, you can do it yourself. Before the two could prepare their method of travel, Ghost and Michiru both tensed up and instantly lowered themselves into a defensive stance. Moments later, two figures landed in the clearing, in front of the hunters. Orotochi eased slightly as he recognized the newcomers. Itake Uchiha. Ghost softly spoke, nodding at the man before turning to his partner. Hey brat. Covering up the gray hair already? The second man spoke. He had blue skin and a fish-like face. His teeth were sharpened, ready to bite. He had a humongous blade wrapped in bandages strapped to his back. Kisame Hoshigake. Ghost said neutrally, giving the man a nod as well. What are you two doing here? We heard of hunters striking inside the major villages. We went to investigate. Itake answered, his eyes darting to Michiru. It were two unknowns. One merged with a demon, Ghost answered before glancing over their shoulders. We should probably head out. I'm not in the mood for prying third parties. We need you to come with us. Itake interjected, turning sideways. Ghost quirked an eyebrow. I'm definitely not interested. It wasn't a request. Brat. Things have changed. We need to talk. Itake's piercing eyes locked with Ghost's. Leader Sama wants to meet you. Ghost narrowed his eyes. If your leader is still in search for the Baijuyo, he's going to be very disappointed. Our search for the Baijuyo has halted for now. We know of your situation. Itake glanced down to Ghost's gauntlet. The hunter looked at his partner. Michiru, you need to head back to Tuva on your own. Can you manage that? The invasion is in 2 weeks. You can't leave now, she exclaimed, worried he would abandon their cause. Don't worry. I'll be back long before that. Didn't I tell you to trust me? She hesitated and glanced down at his arm. I do trust you. Despite that, pointing at his lower arm. Ghost raised his arm that was encased by the gauntlet. When I come back I'll tell you all about it. I'm not one of them. It's a rather unique story. She remained unsure but nodded regardless. Well. All right. But you have to answer my questions when you get back. Mister. Her teammate smiled at her and nodded. I'll tell the others as well. But for now, keep it to yourself, okay? Are you two lovebirds done? We've got other shit to do. You're still as annoying as ever, Ghost said, trying to ignore Michiru's slightly flustered face. Itake turned to the blonde girl. I put a high genjutsu over the border patrol. You'll be able to cross without any trouble. How far is it to your base? Asked Ghost as he reached for his backpack and started rummaging through it. Less than a day. Ghost grabbed his remaining water and food rations and handed it to Michiru. I'll have no use for it. Take it at a comfortable pace, okay? You've got plenty of time. She nodded. Thank you. Orotochi-kun, she joked, adding in a wink for good measure. Ghost raised an eyebrow. I guess it fits, huh? She stuffed the packages in her backpack. I'll see you soon. Okay. Ghost turned to the Akatsuki agents. All right. Let's get this going. The three dashed off towards the northern part of Hinokuni. Tsunade walked out the door headed to her home. In her mind she was mulling over the events of the past days. She had yet to approve of Suzuki's admission into Umbu, but she had little reason not to. She may have hated the Uchiha in the past, but he had proven his worth a dozen times over. It seemed that the boy had learned from his past mistakes. Whether it was true what the Uchiha had said back then still remained a mystery. Flashback. Years earlier. Tsunade sat behind her desk. Her finger interlocked and used as support for her head to rest on. Suzuki Uchiha. What do you have to say about your actions of the past 2 weeks? The Sharingan user stood silently, not moving an inch. To his left stood Kakashi Hatake. I needed to get stronger. Konaha doesn't care anymore that Itake murdered my entire clan. Are you that naive? Brat? We've just suffered massive casualties to our experienced Jonin. Priorities have to be made. Itake isn't on that list. He hasn't been a threat ever since he left. Once our ranks are filled up again will we resume our hunt for the traitor. And what of Naruto? Tsunade narrowed her eyes. She hadn't forgotten how much influence the boy had in regards to Naruto's punishment that ultimately led to his betrayal. That's none of your concern. Why did he betray the village? Sasuke continued, ignoring the Hokage's words. He betrayed the village because they were going to put a chakra seal on him. Sasuke. Kakashi answered softly. Did he leave because of me? Sasuke looked up at Kakashi. A mixture of emotions visible on his face. You were a part of it? But this was a long time coming. Kakashi muttered, locking eyes with Tsunade, who merely nodded. She hadn't been there when Naruto received the majority of the hate. But it had lingered on the boy, and being a ninja meant everything to the brat. This is not the reason you're here. You were betraying the village. Give me one reason why I shouldn't lock you up for the rest of your life. I was abandoning the village. But it was merely one step of my plan. I was going to use Orochimaru to gain the strength I need. That snake was planning on taking your body. You were nothing to him. And you don't think I wasn't aware of that? Sasuke snapped. I was going to use him. After he had served his purpose I would have ended him. And you think you would be a match for a Sunin? The arrogance. Tsunade snapped right back. It's arrogance to think you can't be defeated. I'm not talking about mere months, I'm talking about years. Tsunade glared at the boy before turning her attention to Kakashi. You think he can still be of worth to Konaha? Kakashi in turn looked at his student. I think he will be. He'll have to lose that Uchiha superiority. But I have some ways to fix that. Sasuke wanted to open his mouth in protest but refrained once he saw his sensei look at him. Listen to me very carefully. Uchiha. If you ever betray this village again, I'll go after you myself. I'll break every bone in your body until you're forced to live out the remainder of your days in a chair. Understood? Sasuke looked at her with something akin to fear and nodded. Glad we've come to this understanding. Sasuke turned to leave but was forced back by Kakashi just as fast. You didn't really think we'd let you get off that easily, right? The Jonin asked. Smiling at the boy. Tsunade smirked evilly at Sasuke and nodded at Kakashi. I think this punishment is appropriate for you. Kakashi reached for Sasuke's headband and tore it off, laying it on the desk of Tsunade. You're being sent back to the academy. A 6-month remedial education should go a long way. You can't be serious. Sasuke shouted indignantly. We're deadly serious. Your alternative is execution or a chakra seal. Choose your pick. Brat. A disgruntled Sasuke looked at his headband in anger and disappointment but deflated in defeat. All right. Get out of my sight. Tsunade turned to Kakashi. You. Stay. Sasuke silently left, leaving Kakashi and Tsunade alone in her room. Kakashi, did you find the kid? Tsunade asked him, turning her back to the man. Kakashi looked away in shame. No. Tsunade's shoulders visibly slumped. With a quivering sigh she turned around. I want all the squads to hold their positions and wait for new assignments. The rookies won't like that. Kakashi softly spoke. Nor did he. It felt like he had failed the blonde. That all of this was his fault. Tsunade walked past him towards the door. The copy nin could easily see the heavy emotions that lay just below the surface. I don't care. We've wasted enough time and resources on this. We need to show that we haven't grown weak. I want all Jonin to pick up the slack until we've increased the number of Jonin and Chunin. Of course, Hokage-sama. With a bow, Kakashi disappeared in a puff of smoke. End flashback. She opened the door and entered her house, closing it slowly behind her. She lobbed the keys on the small table that stood in the hall and walked into her living room. It had been 7 years since she'd last seen Naruto. There had been sightings of him near Kumigakura, but he had dropped off the grid after that. Walking through the cabinet, she poured herself a drink and slid down on the couch. Throughout the years there had been whispers, of which Kakashi had always been eagerly interested in pursuing. But it never worked. Despite it all, she still firmly believed the boy was still alive and hoped that one day he would return. Perhaps it was time to send Jiraiya back out. See what he could find out about the kid. You got to come back to us. Naruto. Sasuke leaned over the ledge of the bridge as he peered down at the water. The fight that had happened in the arena and the following news that had reached their ears had certainly put things in perspective. I mean, 6 of our best hunter in against 2 of them. And they come back looking like that, damn. Koji said as he had his back against the side of the bridge. Chatting with Shikamaru. That girl was holding her own against 2 of them. Orotochi took 4 on and beat them with ease. Sasuke muttered as he listened to the conversation with one ear. When I get my hands on the guy, I'll rip him apart. A bandaged Kiba growled. Troublesome Inyazuka. That's how your sister ended up in the first place. She wanted to pay him back for what he did to you. How's she know? A soft voice asked. Sasuke turned around and saw Hinata Hyuga approaching. She had grown from a shy timid girl to a confident and gorgeous kunoichi. She was a vocal supporter of the Branch family and often spoke against her father. Despite this, she had garnered a lot of respect from the main family. Save the elders. She wore a light purple form-fitting dress that went to just below her waist, splitting apart at her thighs. From there she wore tight-fitting black shorts that stopped just above her knees. She didn't have anything covering her arms, except for the headband strapped around the upper side of her left arm. He's stable, but still in critical condition. He lost a lot of blood. If they hadn't brought him back when they did, he most likely would have died, Sakura said as she joined in the conversation, placing herself next to Sasuke. I'm glad to hear that. I guess it's the only positive thing to come out of the whole situation, she answered before turning to Kiba. Kiba-kun. How are you doing? I'm fine. Geez. People need to stop fretting so much. Well, don't get beat up then. Redude barked out, grinning at him, which earned him a punch on the shoulder. I honestly don't even understand what happened at the arena. It was incredibly weird. I think they were just bluffing to keep us out of the way, Ino said, steering the conversation to event that happened at the Jonin exams. Somehow I doubt this is the last time we'll be hearing of these hunters, troublesome bunch. Well, the other villages had similar occurrences. 2 strange travelers entering the village, closely followed by hunters. A fight breaks out, but nobody knows why, Sasuke added in, allowing Sakura to let her head rest on his shoulder. It's strange, Ino whispered, locking eyes with Shikamaru before straightening herself. I'm going to get some food. Who's joining? Koji, being the fiercest supporter of her idea, instantly grabbed her arm and started dragging her away. Let's get going. Shikamaru couldn't help but let out a chuckle as he followed his teammates towards a food stand, closely followed by the others. Michiru arrived at Tuva within the next 2 days. As per Ghost's advice, she had taken it slow, and when she arrived, she immediately went to Rome's house. As per instruction, she quickly used a henge to make herself look like a random traveler and hurried to her old instructor's house. Once there, she rapped her knuckles, and mere moments later the door opened, revealing Mayu. She smiled and gave a wave. Hey mom. She immediately got enveloped in a hug and couldn't help but laugh. I wasn't gone that long. I got extremely worried when we received no message after your fight. We feared the worst. She looked around, her eyes slowly widening. Is Ghost? Michiru shook her head quickly. No. He's all right. He had some business he had to attend to, so he'll catch up with us soon. Mayu quirked an eyebrow. What kind of business? Let me explain it all inside. I really want to sit down. She chuckled, scratching the back of her head. Mayu guided her inside, and she was met by a large group of hunters, most of whom were the ones that got sent out on a similar assignment as she had. Hawk was the first to speak up. So how did it go? Michiru sat down and thanked Rome for the glass of water. Well, it all started when we... She then proceeded to tell them all about how they had entered the village, concealing their identity, and were trying to find their opponent. How they had finally found their target, only to find out that there were 2 of them. I have to admit, I got scared at that point. We didn't expect 2 of them, but we managed to get through our first fight unscathed. But then Konaha Shinobi butted in and they put an end to the fight. We really, Really should have ended it then and there. The blonde continued her story and told them that the real fight happened at the arena. How Ghost had told her to keep the Konaha at bay while he took care of them. Almost succeeding. She purposefully left out the part about his demonic abilities. They won't understand. They'll go on a witch hunt. She eventually wrapped things up. So. Now Ghost has gone with the Akatsuki and told me he would be back as soon as possible. Rome nodded thoughtfully. If the Akatsuki could be persuaded to ally with us, that could help us a lot. Well. They are aware of the situation. I doubt they'll let the unknowns do as they wish. Reibatsu said as he voiced his opinion. Rome turned to Hawk. You have a contact in their organization, right? Try and get in contact with them. Hopefully they'll be able to help us out. Hawk stood up. I'll do it right away, he nudged with his feet against Reipa. Come on. Do something with your life and help me out. My purpose is to annoy you. Reipa responded with a grin. You got that right. Hawk wrapped his arm around Reipa's shoulder and both strode out the room. Itaki hopped off a branch. In front of a large rock formation. Closely followed by Ghost and Kisame. Undo the genjutsu. Itaki. I'm starving. Ghost looked at the Uchiha as he acquiesced to the request. Revealing a small metal door. Kisame opened the door and led them inside. Revealing a small dark corridor lit by torches hanging on the walls. Ghost walked closely behind Kisame while Itaki made sure the genjutsu was set in place before following in their footsteps. After a mere minute of following the small corridor they arrived at a large open room. With more hallways leading in various directions. You guys took the whole Akatsuki thing a bit too serious. Ghost muttered as he looked around. He could see various other members walking down the different hallways. This way. Kisame took the corridor on their right and the trio silently made their way deeper into the compound. Passing various doors and other rooms. You've certainly grown in the last years. Naruto-kun said Itaki as he walked next to the Uzumaki. Ghost's eyebrow twitched. Ghost will do. You know damn well why. Kisame grinned. Still hiding from Konaha? Huh. If they know I'm still alive and know who I'm affiliated to, they will hunt me down. Kisame shrugged. Kill him. Always works for me. Ghost grinned at the man. Yeah. But unlike you I don't have an organization that approves of that. Should have joined us then. Problem solved. Kisame turned around the corner. Stopping at a double door. And letting you suck out my baijuyo? Not the best idea. Always complaining really doesn't suit you. Kisame opened the door and waved ahead. Leader Sama will meet you soon. Ghost entered the room and glanced around. Different sorts of furniture filled up the room. He walked over to one of the desks and noticed a small blue ring on top of a folded Akatsuki robe. Uzumaki-san. You've adhered to my request. Ghost turned around and looked at a man with red hair. His face was adorned with piercings he had never seen before. But what was most surprising were his eyes. Those eyes. So you recognize them, the man spoke. His voice commanding and neutral. Ghost took a couple of steps closer to the man. I thought it was just a myth. The leader of the Akatsuki had purple eyes with a ripple pattern around it. We're not here to talk about my eyes, we're here to talk about a common problem we're facing. Ghost snapped his gaze away and nodded. The unknowns. That's how we used to call them. They however call themselves Reavers. You've got a spy within their ranks? Ghost asked. So far any attempts at infiltrating their ranks was filled with disappointment. They had been found in a matter of days. And their enemy weren't fond of their attempts of infiltration to say the least. He's been embedded the moment they left the shores of Mararka. The leader walked towards the table and looked at the contents that lay on top. Is he trustworthy? The hunter asked. We of the Akatsuki don't betray each other. Now. On to more important matters. The Reavers are 3 weeks away. We need to strengthen our numbers. Ghost couldn't help but nod at his statement. To say they were outnumbered was a slight understatement. You suggest informing the hidden villages. There is no alternative. But that was not what I was speaking of, he gestured to the items laying atop the table. We need more members. From what I've heard, you are a capable shinobi. Ghost quirked an eyebrow and looked down at the outfit laying there. You're inviting your former prey. The man in front of him slightly tilted his head. The Baijuyu are no longer a concern of ours. Ghost shook his head. I'm with the hunters. They've been good to me. They restrict you and hold you back from what you could be truly capable of. However, I do not want to tarnish a potential alliance. If you do not wish to join us, I suggest informing your leader and letting them know of our interests. I'll send them a message. I doubt they'll pass up the opportunity to gain more allies against the Reavers. The leader reached for the ring and handed it to the hunter. Should you reconsider? Ghost glanced down at the ring and couldn't restrain his smirk. From enemies to allies. Huh. Akatsuki doesn't seek conflict. We seek peace. The orange-haired man stated calmly as he started walking to the exit. Ghost looked at him with disbelief on his face. You were hunting Jinhuriki. You were murdering people everywhere. Your ranks are filled with mass murderers. That's not peace. This world must first know pain before it can have peace. That makes no sense whatsoever. Ghost harshly responded. You can't let people suffer and feel loss in order to have peace. The Akatsuki leader looked at the hunter with a calculative gaze. The shinobi world has only known war and conflict, but it has never truly felt pain. Our original plan was to expose this world to an amount of suffering and loss that it has never felt before. Only then will peace last. Ghost looked at him as if he had lost his mind. That is wishful thinking. To put it mildly. Apply enough pressure and at one point or another, all will collapse. In this case, cause destruction and loss of life on such a scale that the idea of conflict will never cross their minds. And you need Baijuyu for that. Ghost shook his head and looked away. If we really need something that drastic for us to finally change our ways, maybe we don't deserve peace. We don't. Not that it matters. The Reavers will most likely succeed, and through them, the world shall know pain on a scale unimaginable. We'll stop them. Ghost snapped back. The man in front of him was intimidating to say the least, but he had vibe around him that put the hunter on edge. He couldn't help but respect the man in front of him. Not only because of his accomplishments, but also of what he was intending to do. Perhaps we will. But not alone. Inform your allies. Ghost pocketed the ring and was about to leave before he turned his focus back on the man. What's your name? My name is Pain, and with that the man left the room, leaving Ghost alone. After having spent a couple of days within the base, he had at first kept to himself. But it didn't take long before a purple-haired woman knocked on his door. You can come in, Ghost said as he read the letter he received from Mayu. Konan entered the room, looking around before settling her gaze upon the blonde. I see you washed the dye out of your hair. Ghost slid a hand through his hair. Yeah. But the dye didn't work out as well as I'd hoped. At least my real identity is still a secret, mostly. Konan sat down in one of the chairs situated in the corner of his room. I'm curious what happened between you and Konaha. It isn't really common knowledge, huh? She shook her head. We hear things, but those were just rumors. Ghost folded the letter and placed it on the table. Konaha is obsessed with their dojutsu, especially the Sharingan. She raised an eyebrow in confusion. How is that connected to your departure? Well, I was a Jinhuriki. You know we aren't the most liked people around. Others will always try and find a way to get rid of us. Konan thought back on the capture of the Kokyo Jinhuriki. IWA had given it to them freely. Jinhuriki have always been shunned by most major villages. Ghost clenched his jaw in anger. Yeah, well. When the last loyal Uchiha came barging in and told the council that I succumbed to the power of the Baijuyu, they instantly wanted to seal my chakra coils. Konan looked at the young man and could understand his reasoning. A boy at that age, with so little left, a small push would be more than enough. I can understand your reasoning behind it. In the end it turned out for the best, didn't it? Ghost looked at his gauntlet. It did. I came to realize that the will of fire is nothing more than a lie, and that your comrades will abandon you. That they are a weakness and can only betray you. She stayed silent for a moment, taking in the words he had spoken. You seem to have found a new group of friends. Comrades that are worth fighting for. Didn't you? I can't afford friends anymore. I only rely on myself. Yet you seem to have found a friend in Itaki. Ghost hesitated. He had met up with Itaki often. Friend is such a big word. Konan smiled and shook her head. It may not mean much coming from someone who've only made enemies in the last years. But you can't do everything by yourself. Sometimes you need friends. With that she stood up and gave him a nod before leaving the room. Ghost watched her leave and soon followed in her footsteps. Closing the room behind him, he headed for the same room where he had first spoken with Pain. Clutching the piece of paper he had read earlier. Where are you going? HN. Ghost turned around and saw Deidara leaning against the wall. He had quickly deduced that he did not like the man. He was arrogant and downright irritating. Talking to your boss. You can just tell me what's going on and I'll pass the message along. Yeah. How about? No. Deidara strolled over, noticing the folded letter in his hand. What's in the letter? Team. Ghost turned around but was jerked back just as quickly. You know. I was told to play nice, but I really don't want to. So how about you leave me be? And you go play with your clay toys or something. It's art uf. Deidara started, grabbing Ghost by the collar, pushing the blonde against the wall. Deidara. Leave him be. You have other duties to attend to, said Pain as he stood there, watching the two. Ghost pushed Deidara aside before turning his gaze towards the leader of the Akatsuki. I have news. Follow me. Ghost followed Pain into a small room and handed the letter to the orange-haired man. They are sending someone over to come to an arrangement. But I'm fairly sure that they will agree to your idea. Good. We can move to the next step of our plan. Pain stated as he handed the letter back to the blonde. The villages, said Ghost, stuffing the letter in his pocket. Indeed. I'll start informing the others. Ghost nodded and turned to leave, only to bump into Kisame. Sushi. Kisame bared his teeth. Brat. Let's have a little chat, we have some catching up to do. We really don't. The blonde walked past the S-ranked shinobi, ignoring the footsteps behind him. Oh, but we do. He slid an arm around Ghost's shoulders. It's been years since our visit to Irosa. Ghost suppressed a wince and shrugged off the arm. Not now. I have things I need to do before the other hunters arrive. Oh? Are your friends joining us? Ghost sighed, rubbing his forehead in frustration. This is going to be a long 3 days. A few days later. Konaha. Suzuki strolled through the streets, his teammates alongside him. They were supposed to meet up with Kakashi, but the man in question was always late. So in return they had decided to just follow his example. It had been roughly a week since the attack and everything had returned to normal. The damage that had been inflicted was repaired and Konaha was back to its normal duties. I wonder what kind of mission Kakashi-sensei got us. It better be something interesting. Radu said. I think it's a B-rank mission. I overheard him talking earlier today with Asuma. Suzuki said as they walked past the marketplace. Radu seemed satisfied. About time I dash. The young man got interrupted by Kakashi, who appeared in a puff of smoke. We have 2 individuals approaching the gate. From what I've heard, it's the Akatsuki. Akatsuki? What are they doing here? Sakura nearly shouted. Worry etched on her face. It doesn't matter what their motivation is. We can't allow them entry. All available squads have been summoned, are setting up at the front gate. Kakashi informed them before leading them to the entrance of their village. All available squads? Isn't that overkill? Radu asked as he along with Suzuki and Sakura caught up to Kakashi. It's the Akatsuki, you idiot. Their group is made up out of S-rank missing ninja. The moment Team 7 arrived they noticed a flurry of ninja activity. Traps were set up and other teams were setting up the perfect ambush position. Suzuki noted that even the Hokage herself was preparing for a fight. XXXXXXXXXXXX. Tsunade looked with narrowed eyes at the duo that were slowly approaching. Early intel was clearly off because she noted that only one was of the Akatsuki. The other was a hunter. Lady Tsunade. All Umbu squads are taking positions around the forested area, encircling the two threats. We have various Jonin and Chunin setting up on the wall. Kakashi has also arrived, along with his team. Shizun said as she stood next to Tsunade. Good. And the civilians? They have been evacuated into the caverns. The hospital has been notified as well. We have prepared ourselves as best we can. All things considering. Taking one last glance at her shinobi before nodding in approval. Get ready. But wait for my orders. Seconds slowly ticked away and anxiety cut through the air. After what had happened to Gaara and some of the other Jinchuriki, they feared that the Akatsuki would show up at Konaha and demand information on Naruto. The moment they were within their range did the duo stop. She noticed that the Akatsuki member was wearing a straw hat that effectively hid his face. The other she noted was a hunter. His face was obscured by a dark hood. I thought they said it were two Akatsuki members. Tsunade heard Ino say. Her words were ignored and Tsunade assessed the Umbu formation. It was a perfect crossfire. It was a textbook Umbu. Tsunade narrowed her eyes and spoke up. Put one hand on top of your head and the other on your elbow. If you don't comply within the next 10 seconds, we will put you down. The Akatsuki member leaned towards his ally, softly speaking into the ear of his companion. We could comply, but that will most likely result into interrogation and they'll kill us afterwards. We'll never get the chance to persuade them. The hunter nodded. You're right, he crossed his arms in defiance, ignoring the words of Tsunade. Hokage. We are not here to attack your village. We are merely here to negotiate. We don't negotiate with scum like you, a Chunin shouted bravely before gulping in fear when the Akatsuki agent slightly tilted his head towards him. You have nothing we want. This is your final warning. Surrender now. Tsunade stated loudly as she raised her hand in the air. Every shinobi under her command tensed up and reached for a kunao, a shuriken, or prepared themselves for a jutsu. The two remained emotionless and still, their arms at their sides. Tsunade's face turned into a scowl and was about to drop her hand when one of them spoke up. We know the status of Uzumaki Naruto. The hunter calmly stated. The Sunin froze on the spot. Her look had changed from a scowl into one of surprise and disbelief. Where, she managed to utter, her eyes wide. That's what I thought. Let's continue to conversation in private, shall we? Hokage. The hunter spoke once again. Don't listen to them. Lady Hokage. You know that nothing good will come from this. I know you miss him. We all do. But negotiating with them will cause nothing but trouble. Shizun spoke with desperation as she tried to talk her leader out of the decision she was likely to make. Tsunade snapped her attention on her longtime student and friend. I know perfectly well what could happen. But it's worth the risk. Shikamaru. Take Kakashi's squad and Umbu squad too. Set them up in my office. I want all other Umbu to set up a tight perimeter around the route to the Hokage Tower. Troublesome, I mean, understood Hokage-sama. Shikamaru corrected his sentence and sprinted off. Tsunade turned to Shizun. I want all Chunins to set up a perimeter behind the Umbu, just in case they fail. Understood. Hi. I'm on it. Shizun said, sighing in defeat but following orders regardless. Tsunade turned her gaze back on the two rogue shinobi. Follow me. You will not draw your weapons or act aggressively. I won't hesitate to order my shinobi to kill you if you disregard my orders. You got that? Don't worry. We're merely here to talk. Itaka spoke, keeping his identity hidden. Let's go, was the only thing she said, cautiously turning her back on them and heading for the Hokage Tower. The hunter glanced at his companion before nodding, following the Hokage towards their destination. As they walked down the hallway, heading for her office, the hunter better known as Ghost watched with disgust at the back of Tsunade's head. I seriously can't believe I'm being sent here a second time. They entered her office and Ghost immediately noticed his old teammates. He took a passive stance next to attack it, in front of the Hokage's desk. Before we start, I want to see your faces. You don't want me to worry. But I can't even begin to trust you if you don't show me your faces. Tsunade took her place behind her desk, her chair shoved back. Ghost glanced at Itaki and nodded. He slowly reached for his hood and pulled it back, revealing his blonde hair, his face hidden away by a face mask and sunglasses that protected his eyes. Itaki grabbed the straw hat and took it off, revealing his black hair and gray eyes, as well as the unique lines underneath his eyes. Ghost almost immediately realized their mistake. But by then it was too late. You! I will kill you! Sasuke roared as he dashed for the Akatsuki member, who had now revealed himself as Itaki Uchiha. Ghost sighed as he saw Sasuke aim a fist at his companion. This is just brilliant, he said sarcastically as he saw Itaki block Sasuke's fist and push him out of the way. Itaki won't retaliate, but I suggest you calm yo. Ghost was interrupted as a kunai flew past his face that was apparently aimed for Itaki. Hokage, I suggest you keep your shinobi on a leash. Your companion is Itaki Uchiha. He massacred his entire clan. You shouldn't have brought him here. All things considered, I should help the brat end Itaki's existence, Tsunade said as she glared at the man. Her jaw set and her hands turned into fists. The other shinobi were awaiting instructions, hands lingering on their pouches or gripping the handles of their katanas. Ghost sneered at her and locked his gaze with Kakashi slowly reaching for his blade, only to freeze dead in his tracks. His eyes snapped towards Shikamaru, who had his hands intertwined in a seal. Nara! If you don't release your Kage Mana no Jutsu the second, you'll be in serious trouble. To emphasize, he slowly started to straighten his back, letting the Nara know that he could break free if his order wasn't followed. Ma Ghost-san, you really shouldn't make threats when you're surrounded and trapped, Kakashi lazily said as he appeared next to the hunter, a kunai poised at his throat. Shikamaru turned to the Hokage. Lady Hokage. Tsunade remained silent as she watched Sasuke and Itaki flurry about in her office, with Itaki dodging all the attacks and staying on the defensive. Ghost's eyes flashed red as he lost his cool. Hokage, if you don't order your subordinates to stand down, there will be severe consequences. Itaki instantly stopped his dance and grabbed Sasuke's by his throat and pinning his arms down. Ghost. Tsunade was initially taken aback but responded just as quickly, marching over to the blonde standing mere inches from his face, noting the red glow behind his glasses. Are you threatening me? She hissed in anger. Not only that, I'm also threatening the lives of some of your Chunin shinobi. Seeing as he got her attention, he continued. To be more exact, Team Ebisu in Kaze no Kuni. How dare you? Shizune shouted as she too joined in and got into an aggressive fighting stance. If you stand down and listen to our proposition, we'll release your team. Tsunade glared at the man and was tempted to punch the man into next week. But the man's information regarding Ebisu's whereabouts were accurate, so if what he told was true, she couldn't risk it. Stand down. Everyone. Let's hear them out. Shikamaru instantly obeyed and dropped his jutsu, nodding at Kakashi, whom in turn stepped away from the hunter. Ghost turned around and locked his eyes with Kakashi's lone eye. Should have let those two intruders kill you all. What did you say? Naruto hissed as he marched forward, only to be restrained by Sakura. Sasuke in the meanwhile had been slammed to the ground by one of Itaki's counters. He was then quickly restrained by the Umbu squad that was in the room. Let me go. Sasuke growled as he struggled to get free. Tsunade marched towards him and raised her fist threateningly. Control yourself, Sasuke. Now is not the time. The Hokage turned back to Ghost. Tell us what you're here for and be quick about it. Ghost reached inside his robe and pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to Tsunade. These two attacked your village a week ago. Remember? She unfolded the paper. revealing a sketch of the two intruders at the Jonin exam. They're dead. What of it? These two were part of an advanced scouting party. They were here to gather intel on the major hidden villages. Undoubtedly your spymaster told you of similar sightings in other villages. As well as my kind appearing shortly after. Tsunade remembered Jiraiya telling her about it. What business do they have with us? It was then Itachi spoke up. They gathered intel on your military strength to send back to their main force that is currently heading towards the elemental countries. How big is this force? Kakashi asked. Pocketing his kunai. Ghost glanced at Itachi but remained silent. We don't know. But they're powerful enough to wipe us all out. There was a moment of silence before Tsunade spoke up again. You're saying that there's an enemy coming that's more powerful than all the shinobi countries combined. That's exactly what we're saying. Ghost said as walked around the desk and sat down in the Hokage's chair. Tsunade's eye twitched in severe annoyance. What are you proposing? An alliance between your village and our organizations. You can't be serious. Sakura shouted as she eyed them both with a large amount of distrust. Tsunade looked at Shikamaru and Kakashi. We need to discuss this in private. Ghost waved with his hand. You go and do that. I'm sure your Umbu monkeys will watch us. Escort them to the room across. The Umbu followed her order without so much as a grunt. Taking Itachi and Ghost to the room across. XXXXXXXXXXXX. What do you think? Shikamaru. The Hokage asked one last time. Well. We have to consider they're both S-ranked criminal, I strongly suggest against it. There could be truth to their story but it's too convenient for them. Especially the Akatsuki. Shikaku, whom was in the room as well, nodded in agreement. My son's right. We should station extra Umbu outside the door and take them down. Kakashi moved slightly. I have my doubts about this. What if they're right? The risk's too big. We have a chance to take down Itachi Uchiha. We can't waste this opportunity. We're doing it. Tsunade said with finality. But what about Team Ebisu? Kakashi asked. We have to somehow convince them to let them go. Shouldn't be too hard, I think, Shikaku answered. Give them the idea we're considering joining them. But first they have to release our team. Tsunade nodded and gave the order to retrieve their guests. Moments later the two were escorted back in. So. Have you decided? Ghost asked. Crossing his arms. We won't decide anything before you release our team. You want an alliance while you have my men. That's unreasonable. Ghost chuckled softly. It was a bluff. We had a team that recognized Ebisu. We merely decided to use it to our advantage. Tsunade locked eyes with Shikamaru before closing her eyes. A smirk appearing on her face. Well, that certainly makes it a lot easier. Ghost tensed up. His grin turning into a frown. Don't do anything stupid. Hokage. A mere moment later. Kakashi appeared, a kunai aimed at the back of Itachi's head. Ghost and his partner seemed unconcerned. So that's how it's going to be, you're making a big mistake. Tsunade narrowed her eyes and snapped her head towards Itachi. Ghost's too calm for the current situation. Where's Naruto? Kakashi demanded. His kunai inching closer. Uzumaki's whereabouts. Itachi softly spoke. His eyes settling on Ghost. Ghost tilted his head. A smile appearing on his face. We did promise that. Itachi. His fingers slowly gripped the katana strapped on his back. I guess we did. Itachi responded. His hands appeared from his sleeves. Kakashi. Do it. Tsunade roared and balled a fist. Swinging it at Ghost. Ghost was the first who responded. He ducked underneath her attack and stepped forward. Disappearing with flash step. He appeared mere centimeters away from Kakashi and slammed into him. Using the speed of his unique ability. Crashing the copy nin through one of the walls. Itachi's head jerked backwards as a kunai flew past his eyes. He retaliated with a handful of shuriken. Throwing them in one swift motion. Hitting two of the Umbu. Naruto came barreling towards Ghost. A kunai in both hands, swing them wildly yet accurately. The hunter twirled around and blocked it with his katana before grabbing Naruto by his hair. painfully pulling his head down, slamming it into his knee. The dark-haired Konaha shinobi stumbled back, blood dripping from his nose. "You'll pay for that," he screamed and was about to charge back in but halted when he saw a smoke bomb drop at Ghost and attack his feet and exploded a mere second later, engulfing the two and a large portion of the room. The duo jumped out of the smoke, their hands held up in a defensive posture. Sasuke used the opportunity and charged in with a Chidori. "I've got you now, brother." Unable to move in time, Itake's eyes widened in seeming surprise as Sasuke's Chidori rammed through his back and out of his chest. But instead of slumping to the ground, he merely spoke up. "Not exactly, little brother." Sasuke looked to Kakashi. Confusion written across his face before it turned into realization. He tried to jump back but was too late. A big explosion occurred. In a last resort, Sakura threw herself to the ground, dragging Sasuke with her whilst the copy nin made a dive for the desk. When the explosion died down, Tsunade struggled to get to her feet. Clutching her side, she coughed and looked at the destruction around her. She saw Sakura slowly getting up, dust and burn marks covering her figure. Glancing at the ground, she saw Kakashi lying motionless to the side of her desk. Her eyes slowly traveled upwards, where the window used to be. But that too got destroyed in the explosion, leaving a large gap that gave a view of the village where several of her shinobi were investigating the situation. "You forced our hand, Tsunade," Ghost said as he appeared from the lingering dust cloud, with Itake to his right. Both appeared unharmed. "We came here with a peace offering, but instead you chose this." Shikamaru grunted as he slowly got to his feet, his legs trembling with exertion. Panting heavily and clutching his side, Ghost turned to Tsunade, whom was taking sharp intakes of breath before he slowly walked over, but not before purposely stepping on Kakashi's hand, whom was preparing to strike with the kunao in his grasp. "You were at a strategic disadvantage, a small office. Not enough space for a wide assortment of jutsu. And to top it off, you had little information about your opponent's battle skills. You, Tsunade, made a terrible mistake. If you merely had said no, we would have left. We meant no further trouble with this pathetic village," Itake added, looking at his brother with disappointment before rolling him on his back, using his feet. "We should go, Ghost. We only have a couple of days left. Everyone will be mobilizing by now." Ghost turned to face the hole in the wall but was restricted by Tsunade, who was clutching his leg. He looked down at her with disgust before slowly crouching down. Tsunade forced herself to look up and was shocked by the sheer hatred the man seemingly had for her. "Where is he? Where's my little brother? Where?" "Eyes. Naruto," she hissed, tightly grabbing the fabric of his pants. Ghost smirked at her, slowly pulling his hood back over his head. "Your little brother is lying 6 feet under." He stood back up and placed his hand on Itake's shoulder. He pulled his leg free from Tsunade's grasp before disappearing in a flash. "Naruto's dead." Sakura stuttered as tears slowly made their way down her face. Tsunade was speechless and just kept staring at the ground in front of her, where Ghost had been crouching moments before. He ducked underneath a protruding piece of rock. The cavern they were hiding in was a great way to remain covered, but in terms of comfort, it was hell. Ghost looked at the inhabitants of the room with a weary face. He had just returned from a scouting mission in Iwagakure, and from what he had heard from Kisame, they weren't far out. Around a large table were members of the Akatsuki, as well as his organization, the Fellowship of Hunters. Something Rome and Mayu had decided upon. It was something Ghost thought had a nice ring to it. They never really had an official name to their group, and they had all been dubbed as Hunters. Their call-out wouldn't change though. They still referred to themselves as Hunters, but as an association, the Fellowship of Hunters, or as people had already dubbed them, the Fellowship, sounded more cohesive. "How are things on this end?" he asked. The group looked up from the table and smiled at him. Michiru stepped away and made her way over to him. "When did you get back?" He stepped out of the shadow and showed her his grimy face, a smile adorning it regardless. "Just now." Her lips curved upwards. She stepped aside so Ghost could enter the room fully. He gave a nod to Konan, who stood to the side, conversing with someone he wasn't familiar with. It was Rome who answered his earlier question. He beckoned for Orodochi to join him at the table. Iwagakuras has decided to help us. Their own scouts have reported the threat that they're facing. They have sent 1,000 shinobi to assist us. But under their own command, he jabbed his finger at a Megakure. They are sending over 150 of their troops to help us. Thank Pain for that. The blonde furrowed his brow. What of the others? Rome sighed, rubbing his face. Konaha, as we know, isn't taking it seriously. Suna isn't going to send any troops but are fortifying their borders. Same goes for Kirigakure. And Kumigakure. Mayu had been walking in circles around the table for a while now. In her eyes it felt like a repeat of Mararka was about to happen. Once the Reaver threat is truly exposed, by their own doing, the others will fall in line. Payne's low voice spoke up from behind them. Rome nodded in agreement. For now, this is what we have. We will leave when Ames shinobi arrive. Ghost stifled a yawn. He hadn't gotten a lot of sleep. Once his assignment was done, he had hastily made his way back to the hideout, which was a day's travel from Iwa. Okay. Mitra joined him at his side. Do we have any idea when they arrive tonight? We'll give them a few hours of rest. And then we'll head out, Mayu answered. You should try and get some sleep. Orodochi. Her lips curved upwards. She had enjoyed the little addition to his name. When Michiru had called him that a week ago, it caused laughter around the group. But not one of spite. The name had stuck. He yawned again. But this time he was unsuccessful in suppressing it. Probably a good idea. I hadn't had time to set dash. I got yat. Both Hawk and I moved your stuff to your room. He dipped his head in gratitude and gestured for her to take the lead. I'll see you in a few. He followed Michiru out of the room and proceeded to knock his head against the rock. Kuso. He muttered loudly as he winced in pain. Michiru. Help up a lantern to give him a closer look. A sympathetic smile on her face. Robatsu bumped his head quite a few times as well. Are you okay? He rubbed the spot to alleviate the pain. He grunted an okay and something else incomprehensible. She shook her head and turned back around. After a few more turns and low-hanging rocks, they arrived at his room. There was a piece of paper plastered on the door, with the name Orodochi Ghost. He snickered upon seeing the name. You're doing? She nodded happily, opening the door before stepping aside to let him enter. It's not much, but it's better than sleeping in the forest, or sharing a room with Hawk, poor Rapa. He stepped inside, looking at the small room, with bathroom attached to it. There was a bed in the corner and a nightstand beside it. Next to the door there was a closet for his outfits. This is great, he turned to Michiru, who was standing in the door opening, with an expectant gaze. Much better than I expected. He undid the knots of his outer garment and threw it on the bed, revealing his dark short-sleeved shirt underneath. I'll take that as my cue to leave, Michiru hastily said as she left the room. It's just the jacket thing, he replied with a slight fluster. She peeked from the corner, a grin on her face. I know. I'm just joking. I'm gonna grab a bite to eat. You want to join me? He stuck his thumb over his shoulder. Gonna take a shower first. I feel dirty. I'll join you in a bit. Wouldn't take too long if I were you. Hawk will eat everything. She winked before disappearing into the hallway, closing the door behind her. He snorted in amusement and walked towards the bathroom, trying to kick off his boots, nearly falling over in the process. Ghost slid past one of the jonin who originated from AIM. Looking ahead he saw Rapa ahead of him, talking with Robatsu. There was a long line of marching shinobi, heading towards the designated beachhead. The reason they weren't using their normal method of transportation was because they wanted everyone as fresh as possible. He had managed to get a decent amount of rest, but still felt weary. 3 days of little to no sleep would do that to a man, regardless of the hours he slept. His mind continued to plague him from time to time. Memories of Iroh saw popping up. He winced as another memory popped up. Mister, what's going on? Please, I beg you. Shinobi-san. Let us go. We won't say anything, please. Ghost. Are you finished with your part? I got a couple of bakas who are actually putting up a fight. The memory ended just as quickly. And he shook his head. Get out of my head. What are you talking about? Michiru asked as she popped up beside him. He briefly glanced at her. Shrugging. Just a headache. We're getting close. Right. He recognized the area. He had been here during his assignment as well. Yeah. Shouldn't be much longer, she eyed him from the corner of her eyes. Are you okay? I'm fine. Michiru. You don't look fine. Ghost sighed. At times like these Michiru's concern could get annoying. Don't worry. I promise I'm dash. Yeah. Are you alright? Orodochi-kun. Kisame interrupted him. Sliding his arm over his shoulders. The blonde shoved the arm away. Leave me alone. Kisame. I'm not in the mood for your childish behavior. Still angry? I didn't take you for someone who would hold a grudge after such a long time, perhaps I should have. Konaha and all that. Kisame feigned surprise. Shut up and keep moving. Sushi. You disgust me. Michiru was taking in the conversation with interest. They had a shared history. One that hadn't gone down too well apparently. She had been curious about Ghost's absence over the last years. And any bit of information she would be eager to get her hands on. The marching shinobi reached the crest of a hill and spotted the beachhead that lay ahead. They had finally left the rough and harsh terrain behind. And met salty sea air. Along with light forested areas. They started making their way down the hill. Where they reached the sandy shore. Pain had taken the lead and was giving orders to his aim-nin. Who quickly went to work. The beachhead itself was already filled with shinobi from IWA. Who looked with no small amount of apprehension and distrust at the newcomers. But they had received specific orders from Kitsuke. Not to take matters into their own hands. They were supposed to work together. Ghost hopped from the rock he was standing on and landed on the sand. Even with his boots on. He could feel the heat emitting from it. He walked up to Itaki and briefly glanced up to the sky. We'll have the advantage the first couple of minutes. The sun is in our back. That will give us a slight edge. Itaka didn't respond. Instead he narrowed his eyes. They're nearly here. The hunter spotted the fleet almost instantly. Small vessels were emerging from the larger ones. Transport ships. I expected they wouldn't get their main fleet in any unnecessary danger. He continued his trek down the beach. Leaving Itaka behind. He saw groups of shinobi setting up traps and making final steps in preparation for what was about to come. A little way ahead. And up the slope. He saw a series of small tents that had been set up. Barricades were surrounding it. With shinobi guarding the entrances. He quickly stepped past them and could see Mayu standing in the opening. Mayu. They're almost here. Is everything set? Shouldn't be much longer. Just some final preparations, she gave one last order to the aim-nin standing in front of her before turning to him. I'm assigning hunters to shinobi from IWA and AIM. You're assigned to Squad 9. They know I'm to take the lead. Everyone's been made aware. Even the IWA nin. He wasn't particularly glad about having to lead a group of shinobi he didn't know. But for the sake of cohesion. He would bite his tongue. Where are they right now? They were with Squad 15 at the foot of the hill. Just below this encampment. Naruto thanked her and quickly turned around. Sprinting towards his squad. He dashed past Rome and Michiru. Who both locked their eyes on him. Good luck. Michiru shouted over her shoulder but didn't get a response. Turning back to her mentor. She felt uncertain about the situation and fidgeted with her hands. She hadn't been in any large-scale battle before and seeing the number of ships rapidly approaching, it made her doubt everything. We don't have enough men. She nearly whispered. Rome checked his squad's equipment. Before giving an approving nod. Not that he expected anything less. Pain had sent a well-trained shinobi. It certainly looks that way. It matters little. If we don't halt their assault, they will turn their eyes on Iwagakure and destroy it. Pain said as he walked past them both, not sparing a glance. Michiru eyed him warily. She knew that the Akatsuki were their allies. But that didn't make the feeling in her gut any less. The man held an aura of danger. One that she simply couldn't shake. Where am I assigned to? She slowly asked, tearing her gaze away from the Akatsuki leader. Rome purposefully dodged her gaze. Mayu wants you at the medic post. Are you kidding me? She exclaimed, waving her arms in anger. Haven't I proven myself in Konaha? Rome held up his hands and slightly backed away, bumping into the group behind him. Look. I know what you mean. But we're lacking in medicnin as it is. Please don't make it any more difficult than it already is. Gritting her teeth, she abruptly turned and walked away, her blonde hair flowing in the wind. Unbelievable. As she was marching off, her eyes caught sight of Kisame sitting on a rock, patting his sword. What? She blinked. And she saw him turning his blade and patting the other side. The Akatsuki agent saw that she was looking at his weird behavior and gave her an unnerving grin. He shooed her away with his hands, shaking her head. She moved on towards the medical post that lay behind the command post. She forced her emotions down. The people there had nothing to do with Mayu's decision and knew they didn't deserve her ire. 5 minutes. They will be upon us in 5 minutes. Some yelled from the top of his lungs. People tensed up at the announcement. And it was quickly repeated down the line. Everyone quickly made final checks and were quickly making their way to their assigned positions. Ghost was one of them, guiding his squad to the front of the beach. His feet got splashed by the water but ignored it as he noticed minor movement in the distance. He squinted his eyes before they widened in surprise. We got incoming. He waved with his hands for his squad to get behind cover while he made himself as small as possible. His team quickly made for the improvised covers they had made out of thick tree branches and other material. Hawk was behind his improvised cover and looked over his shoulder to see how the others were faring. A barrage of arrows landed on the beachhead, but only struck a few. Bastards, he muttered, before he broke out into a chuckle. This is going to be one hell of a fight. A big grin appeared on his face. As the attack died down, Ghost slowly stood up. From the corner of his eye, he saw a small hole in his hood. He let the fabric slid between fingers. That was a close call. Kisame's shouting broke him from his thoughts, jabbing his hand towards the incoming fleet of small boats. Get ready, brat. He turned his focus on the incoming attack. The boats were big, but simple. They were capable of holding a large number of men, but were vulnerable to jutsu. Katon in particular. A jonin ran up from behind him and reached the waters, with more following him. Light them up. In unison they weaved through the necessary seals. Katon jutsu flew towards the attackers and hit the boats with great success, setting many ablaze. Konaha with exploding tags could be seen as well, either hitting their mark, or narrowly missing it and exploding in the water, causing small waves of water to hit transport ships. Even Doton users were helping out when they were getting close. Walls of stone erupting from below the water, crashing into the unsuspecting reavers' boats above. Ghost lowered his hand, watching as his own Katon jutsu hit its mark, setting the boat afire, killing the men and women aboard. A loud, inhuman roar from further down in the water, and Orodochi tried finding the source. Seconds later he could see Kisame running out of the water. The man was very effective in the water, having taken out 5 ships in quick succession. He gave him a nod of acknowledging before turning his gaze to where he heard the intimidating sound. Scared, brat? Not even a bit. Sushi. It was a slight lie. He wasn't scared of what he had heard, but he was scared of the immense fleet that was now slowly reaching the shore. He could hear Kisame talking beside him but paid it no mind. His eyes roamed the waters before abruptly diving to the side as a large spear flew past his head. A broad man dove out and followed the same path as the spear. His eyes were glowing bright red and had a malicious smirk on his face. Naruto scrambled to his feet and let his fist fly, hitting the man straight in the jaw. sending him sprawling to the ground. He jumped after him, quickly palming a Konaha. The man managed to recover fast and rolled to the side. And with a burst of his strange chakra, he elegantly flew back to his feet. Kisame came barreling from behind and slammed his massive blade. Same Hada into the man. But was surprised to see he managed to put up a guard. You got him. Kisame. Ghost yelled as he was reluctant to join. Ships in front of him were now unloading their troops and they were quickly approaching. Of course. The teammates of Ghost watched with wide eyes at the strange man. What the hell is he? Focus, the blonde shouted, tossing his Konaha, along with a handful of shuriken towards the incoming attackers. Fortunately for them, they didn't appear to be housing any demonic chakra. His teammates joined him and together they flung attacks towards the rapidly encroaching enemies. While Kisame was exchanging blow for blow with his own foe. Is that all you got? Ghost ducked underneath the incoming blade and stepped closer to his foe. Inside his guard, he slammed his fist in his stomach. The Reaver doubled over in pain and he used the advantage to ram his Konaha in the man's throat. The sound of gurgling blood reached his ears. But he ignored it. He gave him one final kick, dropping him face first into the sand. The sound of clashing metal reached his ears. And he used his moment of pause to look around. Everyone was fighting and absolute chaos was unfolding in front of him. The advantage they had at the start was disappearing in front of his eyes. As more and more transports were reaching the sandy shores, the numerical advantage the Reavers had only became more apparent. He saw that his teammates were holding their own. And he had assisted them where he could. The problem was that the Reavers recognized his outfit and were specifically focusing on him. It was clear that they didn't hold the hunters in high regard. He saw his teammate Kiro slit the throat of his foe before jumping on the back of another, saving his teammate in the process. It was clear that the main force of the Reavers consisted of men and women that were of equal prowess as that of the shinobi, if slightly less so. A Reaver legionnaire was considered to be of Chunin strength, while a Hasti, nicknamed by them simply as a holder, was considered to be of Jonin or Umbu strength. And then there was the Praetorian, or shifter as they called them. They were considered to be the very elite of the Reaver forces. All of them were well above Umbu strength and many could even be considered near cage level, or sometimes even above it. The legionnaire didn't possess any demonic presence and made up the bulk of their forces. Effective, but in numbers is where they excelled. Hastis, or holders, were individuals who were merged with that of a demon but were unable to retain control. Their mind corrupted by the tainted presence. Critical info that had been given by Rome when they had met. Praetorians were the ones who were able to conquer the power of the demon and not get corrupted by it. These shifters were mentally strong and because of it were capable of creating a near-perfect synergy with their chakra and the demons. Whereas a holder's chakra would be drowned out by the demonics. He saw his teammate kill of the last one and then quickly made their way over to him. What's next? One asked. I got a message that Hunter Rapa needs assistance help. He's at Sector 3. I'll stay here and hold this position, you meet up with my teammate and help him out. You sure you can handle it? The older one of the group asked. I'm sure. Now go. Ghost ordered. The group dashed off and headed towards Rapa. The hunter watched them leave. He was well aware that there had been sightings of Hastis at Rapa's position. I think I just sent them to their deaths. He tried to shake away the thoughts and focused his attention on his next opponent, who only had eyes for the incapacitated shinobi beneath him. He dashed towards the Reaver, grabbing a spear that was stuck in the sand in passing. Thrusting the spear forward, he skewered the man, ripping his insides apart. Pushing the now dead Reaver aside, he quickly picked up the wounded Iwanin and swung him over his shoulder. The feeling of his breathing on his neck was the indication that the man was still alive. Arigato, H. Hunter S-san. Don't worry about it. Let's get you some help. He quickly created a few clones with his free hand and proceeded to run towards the nearest medical hub. The Umbu saw him approach the camp and quickly stepped aside, allowing him through. Over here. Ghost. He turned and saw Michiru waving him over. Stepping past a crowded part, he gently laid the wounded man on the table in front of him. He took a closer look at the huntress and saw that she was covered in blood, which he quickly deduced wasn't hers. She was quickly scrubbing her hands to get as much blood from her hands as possible. "How is it going out there?" she asked, taking in his posture. "Okay for the moment. But that won't last. This is a fight we're not meant to win." "I feel the same way. Not that it really matters." She leaned over the wounded man and listened to his breathing. Giving a nod of satisfaction, she started examining the wounds. His eyes lingered on her for a moment longer before he let out a dry cough. "I need to get back out there." Michiru looked up from her patient and gave him a confident smile. "Good luck. Orodochi. Don't die on us." "Wasn't planning on it," he replied with a cheeky grin. "Ghost. Come in." "Over." He turned and ran out of the tent, giving a wave towards his fellow blonde. Pressing the button on his neckpiece. It had a small cord attached to it. That went to his earpiece. "What's the problem?" "Mayu-sama. Hawk has got 2 holders and can't handle them both. I need you to help him out." "I'm on my way." He briefly looked around but spotted his old teacher fast. He slid his feet back and slowly breathed in before exhaling. Lowered into an offensive stance. A kunao in each hand. He pushed off and disappeared, leaving in his wake a torrent of sand. He came to a skidding halt. Behind him a trail from where he had planted his feet. His hand and kunao were drenched in blood. Slowly he straightened his back, aching slightly because of his ability. He saw Hawk slowly getting back to his feet. He held out his hand, which he gratefully accepted. "I thought you were better than this." "Hawk." A smirk on Ghost's face. He waved him off, trying to get his breathing under control. "Just a short break. You know how it is." He snorted in amusement and patted his teammate's back. "Hang in there, Hawk." "I could say the same." "You know," he shouted back. But Naruto had long since disappeared in the mass of fighters. Itaki effortlessly parried the incoming attack and retaliated with a high kick, hitting him straight in the face. His cloak was blowing in the wind. His foe flew through the air before crashing his head against a rock. With a dazed groan, the Reaver tried getting back up. But Itaki had jumped after him and planted 2 kunao in his chest, ending the man. Using his hands, he flipped over the rock and landed behind it, sprinting towards the approaching boat, which was lowering its rampart. Itaki saw this as the perfect opportunity and flew through hand seals. Katongu Kakuwa no Jutsu. The large fireball hit the boat with perfect precision, setting it ablaze, killing everyone aboard. His Sharingan saw an incoming projectile and he leaned back, deftly dodging it. Standing not far to his right was a large group of Reavers. Dead shinobi lay at their feet. His eyes quickly darted around, registering the information in front of him. He pushed himself off and sprinted to the group, who in turn grinned at the supposed stupidity of the Akatsuki agent. As soon as the Uchiha was in range, he ducked underneath the first swing and countered with a quick jab of his kunao, piercing his stomach. Aware of the next attack, he fell to his knees and slid down even further. He threw his kunao to his sides and knew he had managed to strike another one. He noticed that he had reached the apex of his speed and quickly used a handstand to push himself off, planting both his feet into a third Reaver, launching him into the air. A quick flip landed him back on his feet, his hand already holding a new kunao. He blocked the incoming attack and used his free hand to reach for the outstretched limb and pull the Reaver in front of him. A second later, a hail of throwing knives impacted against the body. Itaki dropped him to the ground once the ranged attack stopped, having serves his purpose as a human shield. 2 shuriken flew from his sleeve and struck 2 Reavers, killing them by piercing their throats. He saw a small round object land at his feet and swiftly jumped back. A medium-sized explosion erupted a moment later, clouding the area in smoke and sand. Itaki came barreling through and jumped into the remainder of the group. A second later he exploded, revealing him to be nothing more than a clone. "Bunshin Debakaha," Itaki said in a near whisper, watching as the group got killed. Konaha. 2 days prior, Tsunade was reading the report with a mixture of disbelief and regret. Multiple scouts were all calling in the same thing. Troop movement. And all of it was heading towards Tsuka no Kuni. She closed the file and tossed it on the corner of her desk. Shikamaru came walking in, holding another one. She was tempted to kick him out. She read enough to know that she had made a mistake. Another one of our scouts, he said as he held up the file before sliding it across the desk. She stopped it with her hand, unconsciously tapping with her finger on it. Was I wrong? Shikamaru shrugged. I don't really think there was a right choice. 2 Ronin came here. With a history of violence against Konaha. We would have doubted anything they would have said. I didn't doubt Ghost's words about Naruto. She muttered with a heavy heart. The revelation that Naruto had died had hit her hard. The Nara looked out the window. He too found it difficult to think about his old friend. We tend to believe what we fear. And believe it? They did. There had been no reports or sightings of the blonde in years. In the past, Jiraiya was able to dig up bits and pieces of info. But that had stopped long ago, thus creating the fear. Tell me. Troublesome Nara. What now? I recommend that our scout keeps following them. Update us frequently. Of course. Anything else? Hokage-sama. Despite the reports, she still felt hesitant to believe what she had read. Send out 5 Umbu detachments, along with a squad of Konoha representatives. I want Kakashi amongst them. Invite them for further talks. Shikamaru gave a short bow and muttered something underneath his breath that sounded suspiciously like troublesome. Before she could press that matter, he had already left. Tsunade stood up from her desk and walked to the window, taking in the gorgeous view of the village. So, war is on our doorstep once again. What do I do now? Dan. Ghost leaned on his new katana which had blood all over it. He panted heavily as he tried to regain his composure. Night had come and gone, which meant that they were fighting for well over 10 hours. Things didn't go well. They had lost a lot of men, and as time progressed, more and more holders arrived on the beach. Akatsuki and the hunter could stand their ground, but the regular shinobi didn't stand a chance. He stood up and sheathed his katana. He walked towards the command post, ignoring the battle cries around him. The wind blew through his blonde hair. He had long removed the hood from his head. It narrowed his view too much. His face mask had been scorned by a fire attack, revealing a part of his lower face. He ducked underneath the flaps of the tent and noticed Pain, Mayu, Michiru, and Attack. What's the plan? The blonde asked. Pain walked around the table on which lay dozens of maps and battle plans. We've lost well over half of our forces. Our enemy, however, hasn't shown their true power yet. It was then that a voice boomed over the battlefield. Rome, where are you? Bring me Rome now. What was that? Michiru asked. What did you do this time, Rome? Ghost asked, feigning annoyance. Rome ignored him and was about to check it out when Mayu spoke up. Ghost. Check it out. Take anyone you want with you. But Rome stays here. I don't want him out there. We don't want to bite the guy's bait. Ghost nodded, but didn't take anyone with him as he walked out of the tent. Rome. He saw Kisame, who was walking towards the shouting man as well. Sushi. You can go. I got this. Yeah, and let you have all the fun with him. I don't think so. Ghost just grunted and pushed himself past all the battling men and women to the front of the beach, where a tall broad man dressed in red with a steel mask covering his face. In his hand he held an axe. Ghost stopped in front of the man and eyed his mask. He noticed the red glowing eyes behind the slits and frowned. The masked man gave the hunter a look. You're not Rome. Ghost crossed his arms. My name's Ghost. Who are you? And why are you after Rome? I remember the name. You're one of those hunters. None of our scouts survived a battle against you. Except for one. You're a dangerous man. The man chuckled. I'm one of the lieutenants. Lord Kenpeka sends me to make sure that Rome will die. Ghost stretched the muscles in his arms. I can't allow you to do that. You can't stop me. Even if your bluefish joins in. My pet will stay just where he is, Ghost said as he ignored the creepy glare Kisame was giving him and formed a few hand signs. Futon, at Shugai. A massive tornado attacked the lieutenant before it released its compressed energy and blasted the lieutenant away. Ghost was about to lower his guard when he grabbed the Konaha and used it to block the incoming projectiles that came from the sandstorm look-alike that had erupted from the jutsu. Impressive, the man then launched at Ghost, who had barely enough time to raise his Konaha to block the incoming axe. Ghost retaliated by slamming his fist in the man's face. The lieutenant staggered back before he managed to recompose himself and attacked Ghost head-on. Ghost threw his Konaha at the man, who easily dodged it. The hunter ran forward and in one swift motion, he let himself fall to his knees, effectively sliding underneath the axe and behind the man. He then grabbed his katana and twirled around, swinging his katana at the man's legs at the same time. The Reaver saw it coming and jumped over the attack and gave Ghost a solid kick to the face. Ghost fell on his back and groaned before standing back up. He tilted his head and grinned. "Is that all you got?" And with that, both the lieutenant and Ghost launched themselves at each other, weapons making similar motions. XXX. Mayo looked from the cliff at the edge of the forest. "This battle is over. We lost." Pain gave a single nod. "We have. Call the retreat." Rome sighed. He signaled the man at the command post and gave a nod. Moments later, the tent burst into flames. Not only to destroy any sensitive material but to signal all their men to retreat as well. As orders for retreat were being shouted in their headsets, there was one man who ignored the call and kept on fighting. "Ghost. Let's go," Kisame shouted as he marched towards the two fighting men with difficulty. The mass of fighting shinobi was hindering his movements, especially when Konaha and shuriken flew all around him. Ghost jumped back and looked at Kisame. His eyes changed from blue to red, having thrown his glasses away moments ago. "Crap," he then looked back at his opponent, who stood there casually. "I guess our match is over for now, Lieutenant. And you think I'll just let you leave? Guess again." And with that, the lieutenant dashed towards Ghost with the intent to smash him into the ground. Ghost smirked and held his hand before him, aimed at the lieutenant. "Chakra, push." Surprised by the sudden attack, the Reaver couldn't dodge it in time and the attack blasted him away and landed in the water. "Let's go. Let's go," Ghost shouted as he made his way up the small slope surrounded by the retreating shinobi. It was at that moment that all the water jutsu users appeared on the cliff and used a variety of water jutsus that slammed the incoming enemies away, narrowly avoiding the shinobi. Once the last shinobi reached the top, the shinobi who were proficient in earth-style jutsus planted multiple walls to slow the enemy down. Ghost sprinted towards Pain and that trick gave us a couple of minutes at the most. "We have to move now." "Agreed. We've already sent the wounded men to Takigakuer. We'll go that way." Pain responded as he signaled Itaka to relay the message. Michiru butted in. "What about IWA? We can't leave them behind. We already informed them before we headed this way. If they listen to us, then they have already evacuated most of the villages. And you actually think they will follow the advice of one of the Akatsuki?" Michiru bit back. "Now is not the time. We'll solve this later. Let's go now." Rome joined in as he ran past them and looked over the cliff as he saw that slowly the Reavers were recollecting themselves. Ghost nodded and quickly sheathed his katana before following the others, quickly followed by Mayu and Michiru, leaving Pain and Kisame standing at the cliff. Kisame grunted. "It seems they have won the first round." And with that he followed the rest. Pain stayed silent before he turned around and disappeared. XXX. Kenpeka stood on the deck of his flagship, the Skeleton, and gave a satisfied sigh after hearing the reports. They had taken the beach in Earth Country and the main fleet was on its way to Wave Country. The assault on Earth Country was merely a diversion to distract the defending forces. And it had worked. Not only had they delivered a painful blow to their numbers they had also gained, but they had also established a foothold in the region. The assault on Iwagakure wouldn't be long now. One thing that bugged him though was that his lieutenant, Tak, had failed in taking out Rome, and instead had fought Ghost, who he had let get away. These hunters are getting on my nerves. And what's worse is that they joined up with another group called the Akatsuki. They need to be taken care of now. It was then that one of his officers walked up to him. "Sir. Here are the latest reports," he handed over a file. "Is there anything else?" "Sir. Those hunters and Akatsuki are becoming a nuisance. I want you to form up a team of our best men. Merged of course. And send them into the hidden villages. I want them to gather more information about our friends. Once that's done, I want them to eliminate all the hunters and Akatsuki members. Rome above all," Kenpeka calmly stated before walking off the deck. Heading to his cabin. XXX. Itaka stopped when he landed on the next branch and held his hand up. "Someone's coming." Ghost landed next to him shortly followed by Pain and Kisame, and the remainders of their forces landed on the ground and out of view. But who? Moments later a group of Umbu appeared in front of them. Weapons drawn. "Identify yourselves." Kisame laughed. "Can't you see? I'm wearing a black cloak with red clouds. Take a guess." Ghost had to restrain himself from smirking and instead remain stoic. "We don't have time for this." "Umbu. I don't know from which village you're fr." Ghost trailed off when he saw a particular Umbu with grayish hair. Ghost smirked. Well, it seems like Haytake has rejoined Umbu. Got tired of teaching brats." Said Umbu stepped forward and took off his mask, making himself known that he was indeed Kakashi. "We've been looking for you." Lady Tsunade decided to help out even after the stunt you pulled. Itaka couldn't help but smile despite the tough battle they had. How can they not know that Ghost is actually Naruto? He looks almost exactly like Minato. But then again his whisker marks are gone, so that might be the reason they don't put 2 and 2 together. Too late. We already lost the fight, they're probably now looking for us. So it's wise that we keep moving. Hawk said as he walked to the front panting heavily. He still wasn't recovered from his near-death experience a couple of days earlier. Kakashi slid his mask back over his face. "Lady Hokage wishes to talk to both Ghost and Itaka. After that our village is open for the rest of your forces to resupply. Also, she wishes to speak to the person in charge." Mayu stepped forward. "I'll follow you back to your village then. But first we need some volunteers to stay in the Earth Country and offer any help they may need." Ghost was about to speak up, but Mayu interrupted him. "No, not you, Ghost. You heard the Umbu, you're expected in Konoha. I must object." "Mayu-sama. The meeting can wait." Ghost said as he held his ground. "No, Ghost, you'll head for Konaha. And that's final." Mayu ordered with a tone that left no room for argument. Ghost glared at her. "Yes. Ma'am." Sarcasm and anger laced his voice. It was then that Robatsu spoke. "I'll head for IWA then." "I'll join you, Robatsu," Rome said as he walked over to him. "Someone's gotta cover your backs, I guess it has to be me," Yuzuri said with a grin. "It's settled then. Once you're successful in the evacuation. Or if the battle's lost, I want you to head out immediately." "Understood." The three nodded and headed towards Iwagakure. "The rest of us will head for Takigakure. Itaka go with them to Konoha. Kisame, you'll join him as well." Pain ordered. "Let's go," Mayu said and then quickly followed the Konoha Umbu. Ghost briefly glanced at Itaki and sighed before he followed in Mayu's footsteps. "This is going to be a long week." XXX. Couple of days later. Konoha. Hinata stood in front of the main gate. Flanked by 2 squads of Jounin. A Chunin jumped from the roof and landed in front of her. "Lady Hinata. The group is 4 minutes out." Hinata gave a short nod. "Good, and what about Umbu Squad 7? They just left the Hokage's office and are heading for the Umbu headquarters." The Chunin answered. "All of them?" Hinata asked. Ever since the announcement that Itaki, Uchiha and Ghost were coming back to the village, it caused quite a reaction among the civilians and shinobi. Sasuke, however, didn't take it quite well. In fact, he was already halfway on his warpath until he was cornered by Tsunade and was ordered to contain himself. Until the shinobi world was back at peace. Or as peaceful as it could be. "Yes. Everyone." Hinata smiled at the Chunin and dismissed him. She still couldn't believe that Sasuke had actually cooperated. Maybe it was because of the short fight they had when the 2 S-ranked criminals had come for an alliance. It had caused a lot of worry that 2 S-ranked shinobi could take on the Hokage. an Umbu squad and 2 advisors. And win. Maybe that had cleared up his mind. It was then that the group walked through the gate. Hinata straightened her posture and walked to the group. She could spot Itaki and Ghost right away. The blonde hair she had memorized since the day at the Jounin exams, she found his hair strangely familiar. Also his sunglasses was a dead giveaway. Welcome. My name is Hinata Hiwaga. I'm here to escort you to Lady Hokage. She greeted as she bowed to the newcomers. Mayu bowed as well, quickly followed by Michiru. It's a pleasure to meet you, Hinata. My name's Mayu-san. And the young woman next to me is Michiru Sunday. She glanced to Ghost, Kisame and Itaka, but they just remained motionless. Ghost only crossed his arms to defy Mayu even further. Excuse the behavior of my companions. They should know better. She glared at Ghost before turning her attention back to the Hiwaga. That's quite alright. We're used to it by now, she said calmly. If you'll follow me. As for the Umbu squads, you're expected at the headquarters. The small group walked through the streets, headed for the Hokage Tower. Ghost saw the villagers giving them frightful glances. He smirked. Don't enjoy it too much. Kisame, who was grinning like a madman, let out a single bark of laughter. Like you aren't. Maybe just a little. Ghost saw a kid crossing the street in front of them. The kid then turned to the group and waved happily. It was then that a woman ran towards the happy child and quickly dragged him of the streets. The other civilians from the sides of the main road stayed as far away from the passing group as possible. They whispered and pointed at mainly Itaka, clearly remembering him from the Uchiha massacre. It didn't go unnoticed that a few pointed Ghost as well. Ghost saw the ordeal and felt amused. Don't you just love fear? People like you make me feel sick, Hinata said between clenched teeth, eyeing the blonde hunter. Luckily I don't care, Ghost said with a smile that made Hinata narrow her eyes. Ghost then slowed his pace until he walked next to Michiru. You know, you never told me that you were related to Mayu. I figured everyone knew by now. But then again, when I was introduced into the group you weren't there yet. Well, now you know, Michiru said with a happy look on her face. While deep inside, she felt somewhat disturbed by Ghost's comment moments before. Ghost focused his attention back on the road and noticed that they had almost arrived at the gates of the Hokage Tower. The Umbu in front stopped them. Lady Hinata, I presume that these are the guests. Hinata nodded. They are. They know that drawing their weapons is prohibited. Kisame stared at the man. Of course we know. Now step aside. We don't have all day. Mind your manners. Hoshigake. Mayu snapped. They stepped through the gate and went inside. As they had guessed, there were shinobi guarding the halls as well as the stairs leading to the office. I guess they're scared that we'll try something again, Itaka said as he was the first to follow Hinata. Just safety precautions. Would you have expected anything different after what you both did last time? You're right. Next time when you try to arrest us, I won't do something as stupid as running away, Ghost replied. Hinata's interest piqued at those words. I'll just kill them instead. Ghost. Shut your mouth immediately, Mayu ordered. With a laughing Kisame on the background. We're here. And with that she knocked twice on the door before opening it. Lady Hokage. Our guests are here, Hinata said with a short bow and left. But not before sending a glare at Ghost and Kisame, whom both in turn smirked at her. Tsunade stood up from behind her desk and walked to the group. Welcome to Konaha. I'm Tsunade. And the 2 men beside me are Shikaku Nara and Jiraiya, one of the Sunin. Mayu gave a short bow. My name's Mayu-san and this is Michiru-san. I don't think I need to introduce the others though. We've met before, Tsunade stated somewhat coldly. Unfortunately, Ghost added. Mayu chose to ignore the remark. Lady Hokage. I assure you that both Ghost and Itaka will keep themselves in check. Tsunade nodded. Even though we had our differences in the past, we now have a common enemy. And while I refused the offer earlier, I'd like to reconsider and have the Land of Fire join with your group against this enemy. Mayu smiled. We're glad to hear that. We can use all the help we can get, and with Konaha participating, I'm sure that we'll be able to turn the tide. XXX. After talking to the Konaha specialist Shikaku as well as Jiraiya, they had gotten up to speed about the invasion. Tsunade then turned to Ghost, who was softly talking to Ataka. Why couldn't you tell us about this after your battle against those two at the arena? Ghost stopped talking and turned his attention to the Sunin. Like any of you would have believed me. And with that he turned his attention back to Ataki and continued where he left off. Tsunade glared at the man. Mayu. You can use our village as your base of operation should you want that, of course. That sounds like a good plan. Konaha is a great place and not too far out of reach of the other countries. Tsunade sat back down at her desk and grabbed a stack of papers. Good. I'll make the arrangements to have a place set available for you. I got one question though. I know everyone's identity within your group. Kisame Hoshigake as well, yes, she said after catching Kisame's eyes. I don't however know Ghost's real identity, would it be too much to ask for his? I can't trust people behind hoods, glasses and face masks. It's not going to happen. Hokage. So get over it. Ghost grunted before Mayu could even speak up. The Hokage turned to Mayu, who hesitantly looked to Ghost. Ghost. Does it matter that much to you? Mayu asked. You know the answer, I'm not giving up my real name. As for my sunglasses. Why does it bother you that much if you got Hatake, who wears a face mask and his headband over one of his eyes? Kakashi I trust. You I don't. Damn, she got me there. Ghost sighed and took off his glasses and ripped off his damaged face mask. He winced at the bright light, which didn't go unnoticed by Mayu and Michiru. Happy now? Very. Tsunade said sarcastically before trailing off when she saw the spitting image of Minato. Minato. Oh boy. Ghost placed his sunglasses back on, covering his blue eyes, and shook his head. No, I'm not Minato. I just resemble the guy. Now could we go please? I need a drink to get this crap out of my head. Jiraiya, who saw the whole ordeal, stood there gaped as well. The man looked exactly like Minato. Tsunade managed to recollect herself. Yes. Please follow Jiraiya. He'll show you to one of the hotels. Jiraiya waved with his hand to follow him and then walked out the door. Ghost. Do you have a moment? Ghost turned back to Tsunade and was seriously tempted to ignore her and walk out the door. But instead spoke up. What is it? Hokage. Tsunade waved the others to continue and then turned her attention back to Ghost. When we last met, you told me that Naruto's dead. Did you just make it up to see me suffer, or were you serious? Ghost felt a pang of pity for the woman, until he remembered that she gave him a sentence that in his eyes was worse than death. I wasn't saying that to hurt you. Naruto is dead. He lied. Tsunade's eyes filled with tears. How did he die? He died in a battle against Orochimaru's henchmen. Me and Itachi met up to assassinate Orochimaru and found Naruto with the same intent. We all partnered up and tried to sneak in. It all went downhill and eventually were surrounded. Ghost sighed. He never had to lie about how he died. We managed to fight most of them off until Orochimaru joined in and went toe-to-toe with Itachi, leaving Naruto and me against the rest of his forces. Ghost walked to the couch in the corner and sat down. Eventually he just couldn't handle it anymore and succumbed to the amount of enemies. Flashback. Naruto walked to the edge of the forest and crouched. It was the middle of the night. He was wearing a dark blue cloak that covered the rest of his outfit. A/N, the same cloak Naruto and the rest uses when they are going to look for Itachi in the series. Only dark blue. You're right on time, a voice softly said. Naruto twirled around and saw a man standing he had last seen 2 years ago. It's good to see you again, Itachi. How have you been? I've been fine. How have the last 2 years been for you? Itachi said as he crouched down next to him and reached for something inside his cloak. Not too bad. I met up with your friend Hawk. He took me under his wing and trained me. He was the one who gave me the information about the unknowns that are coming. Itachi laid something on the ground, what revealed to be a map when he unfolded it. All right. The camp has a large fence covering every inch, so simply jumping over it will be out of the question since they'll spot us right away. We got a lot of patrols as well. I doubt we'll be able to slip inside without noticing the guards. Naruto nodded as he studied the map as well as the actual camp in the distance. It was built in a clearing in the forest, and was covered by a genjutsu. So you want to hit the camp hard and fast. That's exactly what I thought. If we both use cage bunshins and swarm the camp, that way we'll both sneak in his underground hideout and search for Orochimaru, Itachi softly spoke as he folded the map and put it back in his cloak. Also, because no one can know you're working together with someone of the Akatsuki, you'll need to henge your hair and your whisker marks. And I've got a spare cloak as well just to make sure. Sounds good. Itachi reached for a scroll inside his cloak and opened it before summoning the items. Lying on top was a folded cloak and a straw hat. Naruto shed the cloak he was wearing, revealing his dark blue shirt and pants. He then grabbed the Akatsuki cloak and put it on. He looked at himself in the reflection of a small pool of water. I always wanted to wear one of these. It looks awesome, Naruto said with a grin. You're the first one who ever wore an Akatsuki cloak. Who isn't a member of our organization? Itachi said with a rare smile. Yeah. Well, the cloaks may look good, the people wearing are still bastards. You'll get your chance one day, and with that Itachi stood up and motioned for Naruto to follow him, discussing with him the best course of action. They walked for about 5 minutes before they both split off to opposite sides of the camp and waited. Naruto was crouched behind a tree and could easily spot several squads patrolling inside the camp. He was waiting for Itachi to get into position. He heard a twig snap and two voices softly talking beside him, so he slowly turned around and saw a patrol walking past him, a couple of feet away. He then slowly took more cover behind the tree and put his hands to his mouth, and made a perfect imitation of a chirping bird and made the sound 3 times with short pauses. It was used to tell the other person to wait with the attack until the coast was clear. Naruto eyed the patrol. They weren't paying attention to the sound he made and mentally sighed in relief. After waiting for a couple of minutes, he made the bird sound again. He held his breath and waited. He heard an owl in the distance and knew that it had to be Itachi. He was beginning his assault. He put his hands together and formed a sign to Jokage Bunshin no Jutsu. 2 large clouds of smoke covered a small part of the forest, raising the alarm of the nearby camp. Let's go! The real Naruto shouted and started sprinting towards the camp, followed by hundreds of clones. The shinobi inside the camp formed 2 long lines just outside the camp, roughly the same length of the incoming clones Naruto and Itachi were sending. They grabbed their shuriken and started hurling them towards the invaders. The real Itachi ducked underneath one of the shuriken and countered with some shuriken of his own. Following his example were his clones, who grabbed a Konaha or shuriken and threw it towards the men in front of the fence. Screams of pain filled the night. XXX. Naruto flicked his wrist and the Konaha in his hand flew towards a stumbling wounded man trying to get away. They never stood a chance. Itachi snapped a man's neck and then stood up. They must have sent out a distress signal. We have to hurry. They ran towards the entrance of the underground hideout, which was at the center of the camp. How are we going to get through that? Knowing the snake, he's probably reinforced the doors with chakra. His question, however, was answered soon when the large steel doors opened. That's going to be a... Naruto started before his voice got caught in his throat. Problem. Itachi finished with a mildly surprised look on his face as he saw the very large group of shinobi standing there. Naruto reached for his pouch and grabbed 2 Konaha. We have to go through them if we want to reach Orochimaru. Itachi copied his movement and grabbed 2 Konaha of his own. After sending a short nod to Naruto, he dashed towards his opponent. His temporary black-haired teammate quickly followed. Itachi easily sidestepped the first attack and effortlessly blocked the second. He gave a low swipe with his feet and knocked one of his many opponents on the ground. Without hesitating for a second, he stabbed the downed enemy without even looking at him. Naruto in the meantime had finished off his second foe and made a couple of cage bunshins and was picking off his targets one by one, but still at a much slower rate than Itachi. Even though both Naruto and Itachi were putting up quite a fight, they were slowly pushed back by their overwhelming numbers. Itachi and Naruto were both capable of handling Chunin-ranked opponents, but when their enemies teamed up, it became too much. Naruto panted heavily. He swiped the sweat of his forehead and looked at Itachi, who wasn't in the same state he was, but still was showing exhaustion. Now what? Naruto managed to spit out. Itaka was about to answer when someone else butted in. Kukikiku. Itaka. Why are you of all people after me, a pale man said as he stepped forward. You still have something that belongs to us. Orochimaru. Itaka lied calmly. Covering the real reason they were there. It's grown attached to me. Now if you two would act like two genin and surrender, Orochimaru said with a sick smile on his face that Naruto remembered from his days when he was still in Konaha. It would make things so much easier. The snake Sunin finished. And why don't you just die? You slippery snake. Naruto bit back. Orochimaru turned his attention to attack his companion. The sick smile still covering his face. So you can actually speak. Let's just get this over with, Itaka said annoyed and sent glance at Naruto. Can you hold of Orochimaru's men? No problem. Leave that to me. Naruto turned his back on Orochimaru and grabbed a handful of shuriken. Just make sure he doesn't get away. Itaka turned his attention back to the snake lover while Naruto engaged himself in a fight with the large group of enemies. You must realize that you don't stand a chance against me. Orochimaru. The Sunin walked confidently towards the Uchiha. Kukikiku. I have the advantage, Itaka-kun. You've been fighting my men for a while. It has tired you down. As well as your companion. It won't be long before he succumbs to their numbers. He'll be fine, you should focus your attention on me. And with that he suddenly placed his left hand at his mouth in a particular seal. Katon, Hosenka no Jutsu. Orochimaru was caught slightly off guard but managed to dodge out of the way of the small fireballs and retaliated with an attack of his own. Senejashu. Snakes shot out from his sleeves and went straight for the Uchiha. Itaka was already prepared and threw the shuriken he had in his hands, hitting the snake's head on, causing them to drop dead to the ground before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Orochimaru ran past the smoke and met Itaka halfway. His infamous sword Kusanagi in his hand. Itaka met him halfway. A kunao in his own hand. He shifted his stance into a defensive one and held his kunao in front of him. Orochimaru struck first, slamming his sword into Itaka's kunao. Itaka grimaced but held his ground and used his made a fist of his free hand and punched the Sunin in the face, causing him to stagger back. Itaka used the moment to make his next move. Again without making any hand signs. Katon, Gokakyo no Jutsu. A huge fireball went straight for Orochimaru. Not being able to dodge out of the way, he dove to the ground, causing the fireball to scorn the back of his shirt. Orochimaru angrily stood up and quickly made his way to Itaka, awfully resembling a slithering snake. Itaka charged the snake bastard and engaged him in a close combat fight where a mix of clashing metal and swinging fists were combined. As they unconsciously left the hideout and into the forest, Orochimaru blocked a low swipe and retaliated with a kick to his side and followed up with disarming the Uchiha using the momentum he created when he kicked him. After he had disarmed him, Orochimaru didn't hesitate for a second and swiped at Itaka's arms, giving him a short but deep cut that crossed his wrist. Orochimaru grinned. You look tired, Itaka-kun. Itaka gave a rare smirk. Haven't you noticed? I haven't used my Sharingan yet. The Sunin's eyes widened in fear before he narrowed his eyes and licked his lips like an animal eyeing his meal. Itaka made the first move when he threw a handful of shuriken. I expect more from you, Itaka-kun, and with that he used Kawarami to dodge the incoming projectile. Itaka with his Sharingan active could easily track the snake and shined behind him. A kunao slid out the sleeve of his Akatsuki robe and plunged it in the man's back. He then followed up with a kick at the exact same spot the kunao was embedded. Orochimaru stumbled forward before turning around. His eyes burned with hatred. Itaka didn't wait for him to catch his breath and focused his chakra before placing his hand in front of his mouth. Katon, Gokakyo no Jutsu. An even bigger fireball than before went straight for Orochimaru, who wouldn't be able to dodge in time. Doton, Doriyuki. Itaka sighed. Keep your pets out of this, Orochimaru. Against you? I don't think so. Kukiku. Orochimaru brushed his hand through his hair. Lord Orochimaru. We have shinobi from Kusa's outpost inbound. They must have noticed the fighting that occurred here. Kabuto spoke, keeping his eyes on Itaka all the while. Have you made the preparations? Kabuto. Of course. I'm afraid I have to stop our fight. Itaka-kun. Orochimaru sweetly said. feeling more confident with his right-hand man beside him. "And you think I'll just let you leave, dot." And with that he was just about to rush towards the two before he was interrupted by Kabuto. "I'd look towards your companion, he's having a tough time." Itaka turned his gaze towards the fight which he could barely see and noticed that Naruto was kneeling and panting heavily. "I'll finish you off later." And with that Itaka flickered away. Naruto struggled to get to his feet. Is that all you got?" he managed to say between his puffs of air. Itaka appeared beside Naruto and helped him on his feet. "Let's go." Orochimaru escaped. "And from what I heard, there are Kusa shinobi on their way here. We need to get out of here." And without another word he grabbed Naruto's arm and swung it over his shoulder. With his free hand he quickly threw a shuriken towards the incoming enemies who had tried to use Itaka's lack of attention to his benefit. With the shinobi lying dead on the ground with a shuriken in his throat, Itaka and Naruto disappeared in cloud of smoke. End of flashback. "And that's how he died," Ghost said as he twisted his version of the failed assassination attempt on Orochimaru. Tsunade had tried to remain calm, and for the first part of the story she had felt immensely proud at Naruto's attempt to take down the snake freak. That even though he left Konaha he still fought against its enemies. But once that thought had died down, the only feeling that she had left was sadness. Ghost stood up and stretched his legs. "Story time is over. Do with it what you will." And with that he walked through the door and closed it behind him, leaving a silently crying Tsunade in his wake. Ghost sighed in satisfaction. Pure and utter satisfaction. XXX. The 2 days later Kisame walked through the streets with Itaka beside him. "Perhaps we could go to the bar we went last time we were here. When we were looking for Naruto. For old time's sake." Itaka smiled. They did serve some good food and sake. They crossed the street and walked towards the bar. They pushed the flaps aside and were served with an amusing sight. Before them sat Ghost, his legs crossed, casually sipping from his drink. Standing at the bar to his right were Niji and Sasuke, who were drilling their eyes into the hunter's calm face. Sasuke noticed the newcomers and his eyes immediately became red, with 3 tomo surrounding his pupils. Ghost turned his attention to the newcomers and grinned. He had his face mask removed as well as his hood, revealing his bandana and sunglasses. Now this just became a whole lot more interesting. Kisame grinned and sat down next to him, ordering a drink as well. Itaka sat in front of Ghost, ignoring Sasuke's glare. "It has been a while, little brother, hasn't it? Last time we met you weren't in a very talkative mood." Sasuke, who had barely managed to calm himself down, stormed out the bar before he would do something he'd regret. "I'd say he's still not very talkative." Itaka ignored him and focused on his drink. After finishing his drink, Ghost stood up, waved his goodbye and exited the bar and followed the street, not really caring where it took him. Where could Orochimaru be? Word will spread about the invasion in Tsuka no Kuni. And if he finds out about the Reavers, he'll no doubt try and ally with them. Ghost sighed and crossed his arms. He held his head low and continued to walk aimlessly. Orochimaru has to be taken care of and fast. Ghost looked up and saw Hawk running towards him, getting awkward looks from the citizens. "Since when did you arrive here?" Knowing Hawk had left the village to do some scouting. "I've just arrived this morning. But that's not the reason I looked for you. The others are back. I've just received word from Michiru. They're waiting for us at the north gate." Ghost nodded. "Lead the way." And with those words they headed to the gate. They arrived at the gate after a short walk and walked towards Mayu and Michiru, who were crouched down, healing someone lying on the ground. "Mayu-sama, we're here." Mayu slowly stood up and turned around. Her eyes were full of sorrow. She tried to find the right words but couldn't. "What's wrong?" Hawk asked, already regretting his question. Mayu sadly looked at Hawk and Ghost and momentarily closed her eyes. "Yuzuri is dead." "What?" Ghost managed to say, his eyes wide with surprise. Chapter 11. Selfish Sasuke. Kakashi walked through the door of his apartment and kicked it shut behind him in a lazy manner, not even bothering to look up from his small orange book. He slumped down on his couch and sighed. Things had changed so much the past 7 years. And it seemed like Naruto's betrayal had been the start of it. After Sasuke heard that his blonde teammate had left the village, he distanced himself from the others even more than he normally would. Sakura started focusing on her training instead of trying to get Sasuke's attention. But what the silver-haired elite didn't expect above all else was the forgiveness the rookies had eventually shown towards Sasuke and Sakura. The Yamanaka he expected but not the others. 3 years had passed when they had begrudgingly accepted him back into the group. He remembered Sasuke stepped up to him, apologizing for what he had done. He had told them that the reason that he had abandoned them was for revenge and told them about his brother. It took a while, and for a long time he had thought that Sasuke had completely destroyed the strange friendship he had built with them. Sasuke spent a lot of uncomfortable times with the rookies together, and it seemed that Sasuke was trying his best to make up for the huge mistakes he had made. So when the copycat found out, he almost let his perverted book fall, almost. However, Kakashi wasn't fooled easily, and he could still see the hate in the Uchiha's eyes. The determination to kill the man he once called his big brother. His little talk he had with him hadn't helped before his betrayal, and it didn't work the second time he spoke with Sasuke about it. Then again, the silver-haired Jounin would lie to himself if he would have stood in Sasuke's shoes and simply turned his back to it. Though leaving the village wasn't what he would have done. Yet, when word had spread that the Akatsuki was spotted in one of the major villages in the Land of Sound roughly 2 years after Naruto's disappearance, fear had gripped at the heart of Tsunade and had formed multiple squads which consisted of some of the rookies who had made it to Chunin and multiple Umbu squads as well. Sasuke was the first who volunteered. Kakashi knew what it meant. Akatsuki was looking for Naruto. It was no secret that Naruto had left the village, and it was no secret that he even laid low for a short while in the Land of the Waves. If Konaha knew, you could bet your ass that sooner or later the Akatsuki would as well. Flashback. 3 years after Naruto's disappearance, Kakashi walked to the cliff and eyed the village below, which, how humorous it may sound, showed a peaceful aura despite it being under Orochimaru's rule. Glancing to his left, he saw a determined Sasuke with an equally determined Sakura. Behind him were the other rookies, though he couldn't really call them that anymore. Turning his head to the trees that surrounded the village, he barely saw one of the Umbu squads positioned there. All right. The village is completely surrounded. No one will leave this village without us knowing it, Kakashi told the former rookies. As you know, we're here to find and eliminate the Akatsuki agents. However, the only reason you are all here is because of your ties to Naruto, and if Naruto is here, you are our best bet in convincing him to come back. You got your ord dash. It was then that the sound of an explosion filled the air. Kakashi and the others snapped their heads to the village. They could see that smoke filled the air from small building that was mostly destroyed. What the hell just happened? Tenten shouted. Did one our Umbu squads attack? Sakura asked as she turned to her former sensei. Unlikely. If I have to make a guess, I'd say that our enemy has found their target, Kakashi said. His one visible eye narrowed. No trace of his usual laziness visible. You mean they found? Hinata started. Naruto. Sasuke finished, his face revealing no emotion. Though Kakashi knew better. The youngster was a genius in masking his emotions. Kakashi nodded. Change of plans. Sasuke. You're with me. We'll meet up with Yamato at second building on the left behind the west gate. The rest form up in squads of 3 and 4. Make a perimeter in a close radius around the destroyed building. But do not engage anyone unless they try to break through. Initially surprised, Sasuke nodded and followed Kakashi as he sped up towards the gate. The remainders split up into 3 groups and disappeared. XXX. Did you really have to blow up the entire building? All Ataka said was to draw their attention while I sneak out. Not blow something up in the progress while I'm still here. Naruto shouted at the man. The man turned around. His dark robe flapped around him. Brat. You may earn Ataka's trust, but you haven't earned mine. So shut that small mouth of yours unless you want me to rip you to shreds with same hata. Naruto mumbled something about bluefish and a sword wrapped in toilet paper. The blue Akatsuki member took a step towards the kid and glared at the kid as his killing intention leaked towards him. Naruto froze and put his hands up in defense. Calm down, calm down. Ataka stepped towards the blonde and handed him a scroll. You need to go. They have just entered the village. And from what my crow relate is that there are multiple Umbu squads outside the village as well. The east gate is the only guarded by 2 Umbu squads, all other exits are guarded by at least 3 squads. Kisame, you'll go with Naruto and make sure he escapes. We can't have Konaha find out what we're planning. And we know they're very capable of extracting information out of their prisoners. Itaka gave a small smile when he noticed Naruto's sneer. Besides, I doubt that Naruto-kun here wants to go back. You got that right. Oh, and Itaka. What's in the scroll? Naruto asked. Almost having forgotten to ask what the scroll contained. The scroll there contains a crow. And another scroll with an address and a couple of katon jutsus. With what you told me, you'll find some use for it later. If you summon the crow and give him the order to return to me, I'll know if you require my assistance, and we'll meet up on the address that's written on the other scroll. Itaka turned his head towards west part of the city. They entered the city. You have to go now. Naruto nodded and turned around, dashing towards eastern gate. Closely followed by Kisame. Brat. Look, Kisame warned as he pointed to the east gate. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise as he saw more Leaf Shinobi incoming. He quickly performed a henge to change the color of his hair into dark brown. He also changed his hair from spiky to long hair tied into a ponytail. We have to get into the alleys, you kinda stand out. Big guy. Naruto shouted as he took a sharp turn and ran into an alleyway with Kisame right behind him. Naruto hugged the wall and slowly turned around a corner and saw another alleyway that branched into smaller ones. Perfect. Itaka sat down on a destroyed wall of the building Kisame had blown up earlier. He looked towards the rooftops in front of him and noticed that Otonin were fighting the other Umbu squads that did enter the village. Wondered why no one was investigating the explosion. Now I know, still. I doubt that this small detachment of Otonin is capable of Umbu Black Ops with Chunin and Jounin Shinobi on top of that. I should have known that you'd be here. A voice said. Itaka casually turned his gaze in front of him. Sharinon Kakashi, and, he smiled. Sasuke. Next to Kakashi stood Sasuke, who trembled in rage, his Sharinon active. Have you come to kill me, little brother? I'll tell you now that you won't succeed. Not even with Kakashi or with the Chunin level shinobi who have me surrounded. You underestimate me. Kakashi. You overestimate yourself. Sasuke here has improved a great deal and is at least Jounin level. Itaka sighed and leaned with his head on his hand. Is that so, Sasuke? Well. Kakashi. You're an elite Jounin while you're at least Umbu level. And you didn't even land a scratch on me last time. Where is Naruto? Kakashi asked with blazing eyes. His Hitai pulled up, revealing his Sharingan. So you're looking for him? Well. You just missed him. What? Sasuke hissed. Barely able to keep himself in check. Kisame is pursuing him, as a matter of fact. We almost had him until he pointed to the destroyed building behind him. Blew up this building in an attempt to take Kisame down. You should have seen Kisame's face. Itaka chuckled, which was very uncharacteristic of him. You're delaying us? I should have known. All this time talking gave Kisame more time. Kakashi reached for his headset when another explosion occurred just outside the village. Umbu squad's report. That was your first wrong move. Itaka appeared in front of him and gave a bone-shattering blow to the copycat's face, who slammed into the ground. Using the momentum to his advantage, he quickly swept Sasuke's feet away from under him and kicked him in the stomach, followed by a Katon Hosenka no Jutsu, which blasted Sasuke through a nearby wall right into a dinner room where a small family were huddled close together under the table. Sasuke pulled himself to his feet and sneered and formed a couple of hand sings at a fast rate before placing his hand in front of his mouth. Katon, Gokakyo no Jutsu. Itaka mimicked the move and sent an even bigger fireball. The two attacks collided against each other, and for a moment it seemed like a stalemate. But Itaka merely applied more chakra and it soon overpowered Sasuke. Forcing himself to grab the table the family were hiding underneath and flipping it over, using it as cover. Applying chakra at the same time. Once the flames died down, Sasuke stood up, ignoring the civilians that were thanking him and clutching his pants, begging him not to leave. Freeing himself from their grasp, he jumped outside and saw that Kakashi was engaging Itaka in a taijutsu fight, backed up by Lee and Niji, who apparently had decided to help them out. Sasuke performed 3 hand signs and aimed his hand at the ground as lightning erupted around his hands. Chidori, he whispered. Itaka noticed the sudden surge of chakra and grabbed Niji by the throat and slammed him into the ground, creating a small crater. The Akatsuki member dodged Lee's kick and ran in a straight line towards his younger brother. Sasuke noticed his charge and became even more determined. He gave a battle cry and tried to ram his Chidori straight through Itake's heart. Itake in return dodged the attack but gave a short grunt when two Konaha were thrown his way. One embedded in his thigh and the other nicked his side. Using Sasuke's surprise against him, he grabbed his younger brother's outstretched arm and threw him against the next incoming attacker. The Taijutsu specialist Lee. Hakakasho. The Hyuga shouted as he thrust the palm of his hand forward towards Itake's exposed back. Sensing the focused chakra, Itake quickly used Kawarami and replaced himself with a piece of brick from the ruined building. Itake grabbed a handful of shuriken and threw them at Lee, knowing that the Hyuga would simply deflect them with one of their clan jutsu should he throw it towards him. The Konaha trader quickly duplicated the shuriken with Shuriken Kage Bunjin no Jutsu, though keeping his hands at his side and not uttering a single word. Lee, initially prepared for the small amount of shuriken, took a surprising step back. Not in the least prepared for the even larger amount of shuriken. Not having enough time to dodge, he grabbed the Konaha and instead would try to block everything he could. Noticing moments before due to his Byakugan, Niji jumped in front of Lee. Hakusho Kaiten. Niji rotated around at high speed, creating a defense purely made of chakra, blocking every shuriken attack he had thrown. "Thank you, Niji-kun. You have saved my life," Lee exclaimed. Niji panted lightly before straightening himself and nodded in response to Lee. Itake ignored Niji's interference and instead jumped on a roof, effectively dodging Kakashi's Shinjuzanju no Jutsu. "This fight is over," Itake stated and turned around, jumping from roof to roof. "I don't think so," Sasuke shouted as he stood across from his older brother. He formed a couple of hand signs. Kakashi, who had turned towards Sasuke, noticed the seals he made. Sasuke, don't. There are too many civilians in the area. Sasuke in return ignored him and brought his hand once again towards his mouth. Katon, Goryaka no Jutsu. An enormous dragon made purely out of fire charged towards the Akatsuki member, destroying every building in its path. Itake narrowed his eyes before activating his Mangekyo Sharingan. Amaterasu black flames erupted and clashed with the dragon before burning straight through it. Then as quickly as it started, the flames disappeared, with Itake nowhere in sight. Kakashi jumped on a roof and saw that the village, which was divided in 3 districts, had only 2 left. A whole district had been destroyed, leaving only rubble and bodies behind. Kakashi's eyes drooped in sadness. "We did all this. All those innocent civilians. They're dead and Itake still lives, and we're no step closer to Naruto than we were before." Kakashi sighed in defeat. "Scout the town for Itake or his accomplice. If you find them, don't engage. Relay your position and fall back." He received acknowledgements through his headset and saw them jump from roof to roof or running through the street. He turned to Sasuke, who landed next to him. Without uttering another word, he grabbed Sasuke by the throat and pulled him close towards him. "If you ever, and I mean ever, ignore my orders or kill innocent civilians so that you can have your revenge, I'll kill you," Kakashi hissed, barely able to keep his rage in check. "You never involve civilians," and with that he pushed Sasuke away, who slipped over the edge of the roof and fell on the streets. Sasuke lay there for a couple of seconds in anger before closing his eyes in defeat. He nodded once. Triple X. Naruto jumped from branch to branch. Kisame beside him. "You think we were followed?" he asked the blue-colored shinobi. "I don't think so. We killed them before they could relay their message. All we have to do now is wait for Itake at Orika town as planned. And then we go our separate ways," Kisame said. Naruto sighed in relief and nodded. This was too darn close. But why the hell would Itake give me the scroll if we were meeting up anyways? Kisame shook his head at the blonde's idiocy. "Because, brat, he wasn't quite sure that he would made it out alive." Naruto in return turned bright red at missing that small detail. He scratched the back of his head and grinned. "Guess I forgot that even Itake can be killed." "Idiot," the Akatsuki member mumbled. "Let's speed things up. We don't want Konaha to pick up our tracks." Kisame almost doubled his speed, followed by Naruto, who had some trouble following him. "Don't tell me you can't keep up," Kisame barked with laughter. "Just shut up already," the blonde grumbled with anger in return. They're not here, Kakashi-sensei, they must have escaped the village. Sakura said, eyes cast to the ground in defeat. Kakashi turned his eyes to the forest. Reports had come in that apparently the squads that were guarding the east gate were killed without having the chance to report in. Expand your search to the woods. And gather the remaining members of Konaha 11 and tell them to scour out the nearby villages. One squad per village. Tell them they will coordinate accordingly. Oto's military force had been decimated. Never standing a chance against Konoha's elite. If you were to look from a positive perspective, then at least they had lessened Orochimaru's forces. Kakashi grabbed his hitayate and pulled it back over his Sharingan. He sighed and clenched his hands into fists and gritted his teeth. Where are you, Naruto? Give us a second chance. Give me a chance to explain. Yamato walked up to him and put his hand on Kakashi's shoulder. Let's go. We've not lost him yet. Kakashi looked to his right and gave an acknowledging nod. End flashback. Kakashi sighed and closed his perverted book. He stood up and looked out the window. He glanced down the street and saw two hunters conversing before hastening towards the gate. That can't be good. He opened the window and jumped outside. Leave the window wide open. Knowing that no one had the balls to break in his home. Or any shinobi home for that matter. He landed in the middle of street and headed to the main gate as well. He was soon joined by Asuma and Kurane, who had also noticed the hunter's sudden haste. I wonder what's going on. Asuma said aloud as he stroked his beard. We'll find out soon enough, Kurane answered and pointed to the group of hunters who were standing and conversing at the main gate. As they closed the distance, Kakashi could make out Ghost's voice. What? He got killed during the evacuation of Iwagaku. However, not all was in vain. We managed to get their next plan of attack. He threw Ghost a scroll, who caught it and opened it. Kakashi walked up and stood next to him. Reading it over. His eyes widened in surprise and fear. They plan to attack the Land of Waves. Ghost gave the scroll to Kakashi and turned around, pushing himself past the small crowd that had gathered. Itake. Itake appeared on a roof near him. What is it? Ghost. Getki same. We're heading towards the Land of Waves. Ghost said. His voice completely detached of emotion. Ghost. This not the time to plan revenge. We must strategize and coordinate with Konaha. Rome said. He too had arrived at the main gate at the same time the others from IWA had. I couldn't care less about strategizing and coordination. Itake. We leave in 10. Itake nodded and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Ghost resumed his path down the main street. Not noticing Jiraiya walking beside him until he looked up. Jiraiya-sama. What can I help you with? Ghost asked with a small tinge of respect in his voice. Hey there. I heard you were planning a trip to the Land of Waves. I hope you don't mind if I tag along. Jiraiya asked with a ridiculous grin. Not at all. Meet us at the gate in 10. Jiraiya gave a wave and headed back to the gate. Kakashi noticed the Toad Sunin. You're going as well. Jiraiya nodded. And you? Kakashi shook his head. I will brief Hokage-sama and ask for multiple squads to be stationed there. Including me. Jiraiya gave him the thumbs up. Hurry up then. The sooner we leave the better our chances will be. Kakashi answered by disappearing in a cloud of smoke. XXX. Kakashi rapped with his knuckles on the door that led to Tsunade's office. Come in. Kakashi entered with a serious look on his partial exposed face. Hokage-sama. We have a serious problem. The Land of Waves is about to be invaded. He then continued to explain how they got the information. Tsunade's eyes widened in shock momentarily but managed to mask it quickly. They'll use it as a staging point to directly attack us. Kakashi nodded and stared at her. Waiting for orders. Our defenses at the border of the Land of Waves are nowhere near enough to repel an invasion force of any kind. Kakashi. Take 2 platoons and head there immediately. Set up a defensive position and hold the line until we have properly prepared. Also make sure that every non-combatant is evacuated. Take with you whoever you need. Dismissed. Kakashi turned around and jumped out of the open window. Ignoring Tsunade's curses about using the door, he headed for the barracks, where the main shinobi force of Konoha resided. He quickly jumped from roof to roof until he noticed that Sasuke was catching up to him. Kakashi. Where are you headed? Sasuke asked as he matched Kakashi's speed. The barracks. The land of Wave is about to be invaded. I want you to head for Niji and tell him to assemble his squad for a mission that might take us a few weeks to a month. We're going to make sure that the land of waves doesn't fall, Kakashi ordered. Sasuke nodded and headed towards Umbu headquarters. XX. Ghost put on his black boots and tightened the straps. He stood up from the chair and looked to the bed where his weapons were lying. His katana, which was a gift from Itachi, which he found quite amusing. He always thought the young man to be cold-blooded. He still remembered the words that had convinced him to leave Tajuna Inari and Tsunami behind. You won't gain the strength you seek here. Break your bonds with this village, it will only slow you down. You must think like one of them. Act like one of them. Become one of them. Become the monster they all feared you to be. Ghost put his beloved face mask back in place, which he hadn't worn the last couple days on request of Mayu to earn the trust of Konaha. He smiled behind his face mask as he remembered what he had said to Itachi. You know what you're asking of me? To give up my humanity. Ghost shook his head at his childish remark he made. How foolish he had been. In the end he had thrown away everything that made him Naruto Uzumaki. Ghost strapped the katana to his back as well as strapping a tanto to both his legs. The blonde walked over to the mirror in the bathroom. He looked at his reflection and placed his fingertips of his left hand on the mirror. With his right hand he grabbed his sunglasses and put them on. He could still remember the words he had said to Hawk. Naruto Uzumaki is no more. Only Ghost remains. I will become a ghost. Chapter 12. Itachi. Jiraiya. Ghost and Kisame jumped from branch to branch heading towards Nami no Kuni. Kisame turned towards Ghost. So. Here we are. Heading towards Nami no Kuni to halt an invading force that has the strength to utterly destroy the land of fire. Ghost nodded. Sounds about right. Kisame shook his head and put his hands up in defeat. With the four of us, you know I always like fights that are against all odds. But this is pushing it. Kakashi is bringing in more men. But it's going to arrive later because of the preparation, you blue-skinned ugly bastard. Jiraiya said as he butted in. Not trusting either Kisame or Itachi one bit. What did you say, old man? You want me to rip ya to shreds? Kisame growled as he focused his attention to the sage Sunin. Already gripping Same Hata. Ghost and Itachi ignored their bickering that slowly became louder and louder. How much further? Itachi asked Ghost. Ghost pondered his thoughts for a moment before speaking. Can't be long. If I remember right, we should arrive at the bridge in 2 or 3 hours. The shouting eventually stopped and Jiraiya jumped next to Ghost. I feel hurt, you know. Annoyed. Ghost turned to the older man. What? Did you really think you could hide it from me? Asked Jiraiya with a mocking grin on his face. Ghost quirked an unseen eyebrow. Stop talking in riddles and tell me what you mean. You look exactly like Minato. You hate every single person within Konoha and your eyes turn into slits whenever you use your Gekkei Kenkai. Just admit it. Geki. Ghost's eye twitched. What did you say? Jiraiya smirked. And opened his mouth slowly as if to emphasize. Gekkei. Ghost growled and released some killing intent. I dare you to say that again. Kisame grinned and even Itachi was amused with Ghost and Jiraiya's interaction. Jiraiya grinned. I said, just admit already that you're the GA dash. Ghost interrupted by slamming his shoulder into Jiraiya's side, throwing him off the branch and into one of the many trees that they passed by on their high-speed travel method. The Sunin slipped down and landed on the ground, seeing double. Ghost turned around. Still jumping from branch to branch. Only now with his back the other way. And yet, I was Naruto once. Only he's gone and he's never coming back, Ghost shouted. The wind causing his red sash to dance wildly. Jiraiya regained his composure and nodded solemnly. He quickly caught up to him. Thought as much. Why didn't you tell me? I thought you trusted me. You told me so yourself at Nami no Kuni. And risk Konoha eavesdropping? No thanks, the blonde snorted. He ducked underneath a low-hanging branch. I still trust you, Jiraiya. You're one of the last people in Konoha I can actually stand. The rest can go to hell. He looked at his old student and sighed. He had changed a lot. even more than he had first thought. His hatred for Konaha had run deep. So deep that Jiraiya started to doubt if the Gaki would ever be able to bury the hatchet. You know that anger of yours isn't quite healthy for someone of your age. Ghost coughed in disbelief. And living my entire life alone. Neglected and abused is. And stop talking to me like I'm the same 13-year-old kid. That was 7 years ago, I'm 20 now. Jiraiya cast his eyes down in sadness and shame. I guess I can't blame ya. But remember. Not everyone hated you. You had some good friends. Ghost scoffed. The same bastard friends who did nothing against my punishment, and what did I ever do to deserve such a thing? I did Konaha a favor by bringing back their precious Sasuke. Ghost narrowed his eyes in anger and shook his head. No. Konaha can burn to the ground. Then why are you here? Jiraiya asked. The same reason Kisame and Itachi are here, orders. Jiraiya nodded. Not believing it one bit. Yeah. Naruto. While we're on that subject. Mind explaining a bit what kind of group you're in? It's Ghost. And the group is simply called the Hunters. They were an infamous movement who were active in Mararka. They were created shortly after the major cities were fallen and all the countries were left in disarray. It was their job to hunt down every single reaver they could grab their hands on. Ghost corrected and informed Jiraiya. I sense a but coming. Jiraiya said with a grim expression, catching his slip of the tongue after remembering Ghost's earlier words. You could say that. The sheer force of the reavers made large assaults impossible. It became guerrilla warfare. And eventually it just became survival. Making sure that the innocent made it offshore and the shelters were warned in case of attack. In the end, it didn't even matter. Almost everyone was annihilated. Men, women and children were all slaughtered. No mercy was ever given. Ghost said between gritted teeth. Eyes narrowed in anger. Eventually the groups were down to 2 people. Rome and Mayu. So they came to us. To prevent from repetition. Jiraiya said as the pieces of the puzzle fell in place. The only problem is. Ghost began. Jiraiya looked at Ghost from the corner of his eyes. That this isn't the first time that a country has been warned beforehand. This is a cycle that has repeated itself over and over again, and now it's our turn. Jiraiya just gaped at him. Not being able to find the words to respond. XXX. Kakashi looked at the group that consisted of 120 shinobi. Next to him stood Shikamaru. Are you ready for this? He asked the young man. Shikamaru raised his eyebrows in surprise. And here I thought you knew me by now, I'm a Nara. This mission is too troublesome. Kakashi shook his head and turned his attention back to the large group who were either looking at Kakashi, who was standing atop of a small building next to the gate, or were chatting with their fellow shinobi. You all know your orders. We head for Nami no Kuni to defend the Great Naruto Bridge. Your squad leader has your assigned task. Prepare yourself. We move in 5 minutes. Kakashi turned to Shikamaru, ignoring the chuckles from the shinobi at the mention of the Great Naruto Bridge. Koji was coming along as well. Yeah. You know we work well together. Taking him with us will even the odds against some of their stronger reavers. I doubt that this Koji could go against a holder. Even if you are coordinating the attack. A voice intervened. Kakashi looked down and saw one of the hunters leaning against the wall of the building they were standing on. He had ruffled black hair. Care to elaborate? Kakashi scratched his head and chuckled. I didn't quite catch your name. The hunter chuckled as well. My name's Hawk. And what is there to explain? As far as we know, there are at least 2 types of shinobi, or whatever you want to call their ground troops. You have their regulars, who are at Chunin/Jounin strength. And then you have the holders. Holders have strength that varies from Umbu strength to Kage strength. So it all depends on who you face. If you're lucky, you just fight their regulars. But if you're not, well, let's just say that you'd be lucky if you're still alive after going against one of their holders. Kakashi thought back to the fight between Ghost and Ryodora. The fight Ghost had a couple of weeks ago in our arena, was that a holder? Hawk nodded. He was. However, we learned that the Reaver was merely sent to gather intelligence. And only to become a holder if the chance arose. Not when he saw fit. Kakashi looked at the man with a puzzled look on his face. What do you mean become a holder? Holders are people who have merged their body and soul with that of a demon. That was the reason why the Reaver attacked your village. However, the man was still inexperienced with the abrupt and tremendous changes made to his body and still had to adjust. This gave Ghost an edge in the battle, Hawk told the copycat. With Shikamaru listening in, Kakashi looked at him with wide eyes. This information was invaluable. Why do we hear from this now and not the moment we made the alliance 3 days ago? Hawk shrugged. We were still gathering intel from our previous engagement in IWA. But if I'm not mistaken, Mayu-sama is reporting this to the Hokage as we speak. Description of these holders? Shikamaru asked. Hawk smirked. Glowing blood-red eyes. Pupils often turn to slits and either their left or right hand turns into claw of the demon itself. That's all we know so far. Kakashi glanced at Shikamaru, who remembered as well that the descriptions given were exactly what happened to Ghost and Ryodora. Then that means that Ghost is a holder. Hawk merely shook his head. Ghost is a unique case. Ghost has had the trait long before the Reavers came to the elemental countries. On top of that, Ghost can trigger it. It's not permanent, which is with the holders. Kakashi nodded in understanding, as did Shikamaru. Keep this information about Ghost to yourself. Very few people know, and if the rest knew, they'd execute him on the spot without giving him the chance to justify it. Hawk said sternly and started to walk away. Kakashi watched as Hawk turned around a corner and turned to Shikamaru. We can't misplace this information, we'll have to keep this to ourselves for the time being. I agree. Anyways, let's get this troublesome mission started, Shikamaru said with a sigh. Shikamaru turned around and saw Ino sprinting towards him. In full Jounin gear. Ino. What are you wearing? Shikamaru asked in disbelief and minor annoyance. What does it look like? It's my Jounin gear. I can see that. But why are you wearing it? You almost never wear it because of your work at the intelligence division. If you think that you're coming along with us on this mission, you're wrong, said Shikamaru as he was turning his attention back to the mass of shinobi that was massing at the main gate preparing to head out. I'm joining. Whether you like it or not, Ino said as she crossed her arms on her chest, showing how serious and stubborn she was. Ino. Shikamaru began but was interrupted by Kakashi. Shikamaru. We could use her mind transfer abilities to interrogate any enemies we may capture. Shikamaru glared at Kakashi. I don't want her to come along because I know she won't simply comply with a task that will have her do nothing until we may or may not capture someone. Kakashi shook his head. Don't hide behind those lies, you don't want to risk losing the woman you love, so you want to keep her out of this fight. Shikamaru Nara, that is very selfish of you. Shikamaru opened his mouth to retort but nothing escaped his mouth. He cast his gaze towards the ground. I guess you're right. It's selfish of me to want her to stay and live. He sighed and looked at the blue bright sky. Shika-kun. Ino started before she ran to him and enveloped him into a hug. Kakashi merely smiled and turned away from the two lovebirds, giving them some privacy. He jumped off the roof and blended himself in the crowd of shinobi, saying goodbye to their friends and families just in case they didn't return. Kakashi knew that the civilians didn't understand. That suddenly a military power had risen that was beyond anyone's comprehension. Hell. I'm not sure if I understand. Or believe it for that matter. Kakashi. What's with the delay? Let's get going. The copycat addressed the voice of Suzuki with a turn of his body. We're just taking Ino with us in case we capture someone. HN. And I take it that making out with Shikamaru is part of that plan. Kakashi chuckled. Something like that. He dismissed any further comment with a wave of his hand. Let's get going, Shikamaru said as he joined the two. Kakashi saw Ino standing behind him and waved at her. Ino noticed and returned the gesture. He then walked forward and stood in front of the platoon-sized group of shinobi. All right. It's time to head out. Stick close to the rest of your squad and don't fall behind. With that, Kakashi twirled around and sprinted out the gate, followed by a large group of Umbu. Elite Jounin and Jounin combined. Triple X. Pain, whom had arrived at Konaha shortly after the demise of Yuzuri, sat in one of the many chairs inside the compound which was given by the Hokage. Akatsuki and the hunters had gone to work immediately, setting up a command center which was directly linked with the Hokage Tower and Umbu headquarters. The report one of his spies within IWA had sent gave him the impression that Ghost was wrong and that the invasion had started at IWA as they initially had suspected. But the report Ghost had sent didn't lie, and that meant that the Reavers had started their attacks on two fronts. And both in full force. "Something on your mind, Leader Sama?" Konan asked as she entered the room. "Konaha is sending shinobi to Nami no Kuni to stop the attack there. But I'm also concerned about the invasion we stalled. They're advancing through IWA fast. At this rate they will have conquered IWA within 2 to 4 weeks. Depending on the remaining shinobi." Pain looked up at Konan. "Send Deidara along with Kakuzu and Haiden to slow them down. Also send Sasori back to our hideout to grab any relevant data we might have left behind." Konan nodded and left the room, leaving Pain to ponder his thoughts. At first he had been annoyed by Itaki and Kisame's sudden departure but accepted it because it was a good plan. Even if Ghost had asked for their help purely for revenge on their fellow hunter. He heard the opening and closing of a door and noticed Rome and Michiru walking towards the map that was hanging on the wall on the far end of the room. "You think it'll be enough?" Michiru asked Rome as she looked at the miniature flag placed on the spot where Nami no Kuni was located. "I doubt it, Ghost. Itaki and Kisame are the only ones with perhaps the copycat that are capable of fighting those bastards. The rest that are being sent are going straight into the meat grinder." Michiru looked at him with surprise plastered on her face. "What makes you think that?" "The battle at IWA may not have been a success, but the shinobi we managed to gather were capable of holding their own against the less powerful Reavers." "That is because," Pain said as he joined the conversation, still sitting on his chair, not bothering to get up. "Even though the number of shinobi we were given were few, it was more than what Kakashi Hatake has with him. Don't discount the fact that apparently the invasion we faced was a mere diversion to make us believe that what we faced there was the real thing. Your fellow hunter Yuzuri may have died, but his sacrifice wasn't in vain." Michiru's eyes twitched at the mentioning of Yuzuri. She had taken his death not well, and to hear Pain mention him without a tremor of emotion in his voice made her seethe. Rome placed a hand on her shoulder, as if he knew that she was angered by Pain's input. "Exactly. We don't know what Ghost and the others are facing, but whatever it is, it must be incredible powerful. If the size of the diversion is any proof of that, then why aren't we going?" Michiru asked. "That's because Yumeu and I will be presenting our group during the Cage Summit that is being held in a couple of days." "I thought we already had the major villages on our side," the blonde female hunter asked. "If you mean that they support us because they sent shinobi to assist with the battle at IWA, then no, you're wrong. They sent those troops because of multiple reasons. One is of course the threat that we managed to convince them of. But there is more than that. This was also to show their military might and to evaluate the situation, knowing what to expect when an attack eventually comes to their country. They didn't merely do it because they trust us." Pain answered, not once taking his eyes off the pieces of paper lying in front of him. "Are you coming to the summit as well?" "Pain-san?" Michiru asked Pain, not sure what title to give the man. "No. My appearance wouldn't help us in the slightest. It would most likely cause an incident which would only fracture our relation with the other hidden villages." Rome chuckled. "Not that it would make a lot of difference. What would you rather have? That they still brand us kill on sight?" Pain responded easily. "You're still targeted kill on sight, only word has spread about our alliance with Konaha, so they refrained from attacking you outright. At least until after the summit," Rome said. "Then why did the major hidden villages agree to send men to help?" Michiru asked to no one in particular. "All comes back to what I said earlier. They want to end this threat as much as us. However, they sent their men to evaluate the situation. If it was indeed true, then they'd engage the Reavers. But if the whole story was a fake, then the hidden villages just placed their shinobi in a strategical position." Pain explained. "How so?" Michiru asked, surprised to see how talkative the leader of the Akatsuki was. "I grow tired of explaining. What happens when you remove the Reaver threat but leave the shinobi? Akatsuki and the hunters at the same place?" "Well," Michiru began, "you'd have the shinobi of the villages on one side and the Akatsuki and hunters on the other side." Pain nodded. Exactly. The only threat the shinobi world would have are both our groups. They would have hundreds of shinobi and a small group of S-rank criminals in close proximity of each other. I can understand they hate your people. But us? Michiru said, turning her head to Rome with a questioning gaze. Rome walked to the table Pain was sitting and took a seat as well. Our hands aren't clean. Michiru. We have done a lot of bad things to ensure that the inevitable would never come. Rome rubbed his face and sighed. A lot of things had to be done to ensure success. And now we're here. With only a couple of us who actually stands a chance against one of those holders. Michiru looked at Rome with worry in her eyes. Can't give up hope yet. We just started. Rome gave her a reassuring smile. Who said anything about giving up? Triple X. Seriously. I can't believe that anyone with a sane mind would call this bridge the Great Naruto Bridge. Kisame muttered as they walked across said bridge. Ghost's eye twitched and gave the blue man a head slap. What would you rather have it called? The Great Sushi Bridge. Have to admit. It does have a ring to it. Kisame growled and tried to punch Ghost, who ducked and decided to walk next to attack it. I agree with Kisame. The name of the bridge is ridiculous. Itaka said as well. A small smile forming at the corner of his mouth. Screw you both. Ghost grumbled. Jiraiya watched the casual conversations that had passed around the last hours with amusement. It was mostly Kisame and Naruto who started the conversations. And most of the times it started when either Kisame or Naruto did something to annoy the other. But never once did they dare to pull the same stunt on Itaka. Jiraiya shook his head and smiled as he watched Naruto casually ducking underneath the weak punch Kisame had thrown. He had asked the blonde why they never tried that stuff on Itaka. It had caused a simultaneous shudder from the two, and all they said was that Itaka always emerged victorious at the end. They had arrived at the other end of the bridge and were met by civilians who were running around, desperately trying to get their families and belongings together. I guess they know what's coming. Ghost softly said, which earned him a nod from Jiraiya. As the small group approached the village, the villagers stopped and turned to the newcomer. There was a moment of silence before everyone started shouting and asking questions about the situation. Calm down, people, a voice rang out. Ghost and the others watched as an older male with gray hair and a large beard walked forward. Who are you and what are you doing here? Did Konaha send you? Jiraiya noticed that Ghost remained rooted to the ground, unable to speak, so instead he spoke up. Konaha sent us, yes. We're here to make sure you all get evacuated before the attacker reaches the village. A random female woman spoke up. But you're only with the four of you. What can you do against a fleet that size? We're merely delaying them. We have more men incoming. But because of the size it's going to take a while. The man with the beard nodded in understanding. Follow me. He turned around and beckoned with his hand to follow. The villagers quickly stepped aside to let them through. They followed the man through the gate that led to the village. He turned his head and looked at them from the corner of his eyes. My name is Tajuna, I am the builder of the Great Naruto Bridge. I'm also in charge of the evacuation. Since our mayor ran out on us the moment he saw those ships. Itaka's eyes turned to Ghost, who remained emotionless and very silent. How far out are those ships, Tajuna-san? Tough to say. We thought they would have reached shore by now. But they are still hours away. Tajuna answered. Perhaps the weather? From what I've heard is that Nami no Kuni often has bad weather. Whether it's rain or mist. Itaki responded. We noticed them this morning. And by the end of the morning mist began to settle. Perhaps that's the reason. Tajuna told them as he led the way across the small town square. That's probably it, the mist obscures our movement here. So they don't want to take any chances by walking into a trap. Jiraiya said as he joined the conversation, tearing his eyes away from the blonde hunter. Tajuna walked to one of the many houses and led them inside. Once they entered the living room, they saw several people in armor standing. These are the men that are leading the samurai here. Ghost snapped out of his thoughts. I have to focus. My name's Jiraiya. And the men beside me are Itaka, Kisame and Ghost. Jiraiya introduced and pointed to his respective companions. We're here to help you fend off the attack until everyone is evacuated to Hai no Kuni. One of the samurai with long dark brown hair tied in a ponytail. My name's Nawi. Me and my men were tasked with protecting this village. After the Gato incident and the attack on the village not long after that, Konoha was unable to provide the village with the necessary shinobi. Because of the invasion during the Chunin exam. Don't really care for the history lesson. How many men you got here? Ghost snapped. Earning a glance from Jiraiya, Nawi narrowed his eyes and answered. We have 130 men stationed here. Our plan was to set up the men on the walls that surround the entire village. As you have no doubt seen. It reaches to the bridge. Yeah, but those wooden walls are useless. Hell. I can probably slam right through it with my sword in 2 or 3 blows. Kisame said. Already seen the walls once they had crossed the bridge. Then what do you suggest, Kisame-san? Because those walls are the only thing that separates us from those bastards, one of the samurai responded. Jiraiya stepped forward. Let's reinforce it with chakra. If we do that, then not only will it survive the blows, but also prevent enemies from running up the walls. Tajuna looked puzzled. Chakra reinforced? What's that? Kisame looked at the bridge builder. I wonder why you're still here, since you clearly have no military knowledge whatsoever. Old man. Kisame. Itaka softly intervened. He has a right to know what's going to happen. Tajun, who looked a bit flustered, grunted in agreement with Itaka. To answer your question, chakra reinforced, or better named as chakra layer, is often used on walls and buildings to fortify those positions. Shinobi place their hand on an object and send chakra towards it. The more chakra the person sends, the stronger the object becomes to attacks. But it requires a delicate chakra control. Itaki explained. Ghost walked around the men and looked outside the window. Nawi. How many men do you think you can spare? Who have larger than normal chakra supply and have decent control over it? Not much. 10 at the most. Jiraiya shook his head. That's nowhere near enough. We need at the very least 20 to 25 to cover the entire wall. I got that covered. I'll provide those men with 30 clones to support them. Ghost answered before Nawi could respond. You sure you got enough chakra for that? Brat? Even if it is only 30 clones, they need to have a large dosage of chakra. Kisame asked. Ghost nodded. Don't worry. Sushi. 30 I can handle. Ignoring Ghost's odd yet very fitting nickname for the big blue man, Nawi turned to his men. You know what to do. Dismissed, he turned back to the shinobi and grabbed his helmet from the table. We already have set every trap we have in the forest that's between the village and the shore. But if you have any extra with you, like exploding tags, please set them up. Ghost reached into his pouch and gave Itaka his small stack of exploding tags. I'll stay here and help Nawi-san with spreading the samurai along the wall. We'll head into the forest. Don't reminisce for too long, Itaki added the last part with an almost amused look. When you set up the traps, please step on one. Kisame. I'll give you 800 ryo if you push him. Ghost remarked with a smirk and turned around. Giving a wave. Itaka smiled before noticing Kisame grinning like an idiot. If you even try to pull that prank on me, I will Tsukuyomu you for 3 seconds. Kisame abruptly stopped grinning and marched out the door. Unsatisfied at Itaka's counter, Jiraiya looked at the exchange with a sweat drop on the back of his head. Do I even want to know what Tsukuyomi is? No you don't, Jiraiya-sama. And with that, Itaka followed Ghost and Kisame's path. XXX. A lone figure stood outside, looking at the opening of a cave which had held hideout of the Akatsuki not long ago. It seems that the plans have been altered, but to what end? Have our goals been altered beyond recognition? Chapter 13, Nami no Kuni Part 2. Ghost walked across the empty town square when he heard someone yell. Inari. I said no. Inari marched around one of the many corners. Mom. I don't care. I'm staying. Inari looked up and saw a hooded man with a black hood. He wore a black tunic with a brown leather belt. Underneath the belt was a red sash. His tunic split near his knees. Underneath his tunic he wore fitting black pants. Who are you? Ghost's breathing hitched. Being around Tajuna was bad enough, but being around the kid, it brought back a lot of memories. My name is Ghost. I'm sent here to help protect your village. And who are you? Inari gave him a wary look. Inari is my name. While I doubt you didn't hear it before. Ghost nodded and looked him over. He had grown a lot. Though he still was a dwarf compared to him. He didn't wear a hat anymore and he had his hair blown back. In a ruffled manner. And why were you running from your mom? Because I don't want him to fight. He needs to come with me to Konaha. Tsunami said as she too rounded the corner. Glaring at Inari. Ghost looked at the woman he considered to be family before turning his gaze at the armor Inari wore and noticed it was a standard samurai outfit. Boy. Do you have any experience at all? Inari looked offended. Of course I do. I've been training with the samurai for a year now. And I'm a month away from graduation. And now you think you stand a chance against the Reavers? Inari looked puzzled for a moment before realizing that the incoming attackers were probably titled as Reavers. I think so. Will ha dash. He was cut off when Ghost suddenly appeared before him with the blunt side of the kunai pressed against his throat. If I were a Reaver. You'd be dead. You don't belong in this fight. Boy. Go with your mom. The hunter turned around and left. Leaving a stunned Inari and Tsunami behind. Inari shook with rage and drew his sword. I have more reasons to fight here than you. This isn't even your village. I'm not going to run away. Ever. Ghost looked over his shoulder. Are you sure this is what you want? The chance that you're going to die dwarfs your survival chances. No one attacks my home without feeling the consequences. Inari shouted. Ghost was torn between choosing to demand him to go with his mother and allowing him to stay. Not caring whether he had any authority. If I were in his shoes I'd probably do the same. Report to Nawi-san for your squad assignment. Inari nodded his thanks and sprinted away. Tsunami marched forward. Please. You can't let him fight. He's just a kid. A kid who wants to fight for his home because he's afraid he'll never see it again if he doesn't. He's what? 14 years old. I've been a shinobi since I was 12, so age doesn't matter. Ghost retorted. Completely siding with Inari. Tsunami looked at him a moment before turning towards where her son went. Please keep him safe. Ghost gave an invisible smile. I can't promise anything, but I'll stick close to him. Now ma'am. I suggest you head for the bridge. Tajuna is no doubt waiting for you. Tsunami raised an eyebrow in surprise. And how do you know Tajuna? Well, I met him. Tsunami shook her head. And how do you know that he and I are related? Because you obviously do. Ghost inwardly cursed himself for his slip-up. I only assumed. What is it, attack it? Tsunami narrowed her eyes. You're not getting off that easy, mister. Ghost waved and began sprinting towards the gate. Gotta go. And you should too. They're almost here. Tsunami immediately turned around and ran back to the bridge. Silently praying for her son. XXX. Ghost stood on the wall with Inari next to him. Ghost. We've set the trap. Kisame is doing his thing and delaying the transport ships. He'll meet up with us in the forest. On the edge of the field. Jiraya's voice crackled through his headset. Ghost reached for his headset around his neck. Understood. I'm heading to you now, my clones are in place and are awaiting the order. Ghost quickly turned to Nawi. All right. I'm heading in the forest. Delaying as much of them as I can. Keep your men on the wall and keep an eye out for anyone who might slip past us. Nawi saluted the man. Good luck. Ghost. Inari looked at the hunter and nodded. Don't die on us. Ghost chuckled. I'm not planning to. He jumped over the cover of the wall and sprinted in the forest. He found the others after a couple of minutes running. He could hear explosions in front of him. Presumably where Kisame was wreaking havoc. Jiraiya was crouched behind a tree with Itaka doing the same. Ghost. Create clones and spread them around as much as you can. I've already done the same. As did Itaka. Ghost formed a hand sign and created a group of clones who quickly hid behind trees and bushes. The explosion ceased and the three shinobi readied themselves. Minutes later Kisame came running through the field of traps. Careful not to trigger any. I took out 5 of their transport ships. But there are a lot of them. How much? Ghost asked. I'd say at the least 30 to 50. Kisame answered, glancing over his shoulder every so often. From our previous battle we know that there are at least 20 per boat, Itaki added. They have sent hundreds for Nami no Kuni and this is only the first wave. I am sure there will be more. Jiraiya heard footsteps and a lot of them. Marching through the forest. Accompanied by the voices of a mass of men and women. They're here. The four-man squad grabbed their weapons and prepared themselves. Seconds later the army of reavers, dressed in various outfits, marched right into their trap. Itaka looked at Jiraiya, who nodded. He raised his hand and formed the snake sign. Do it, Jiraiya whispered. Itaka focused and activated the traps. First one exploded but was shortly followed by many more, blocking out any screams from the reavers caught in the trap. Dozens were caught in the explosion and were either killed or heavily wounded. Ghost ran from his spot behind the tree, his katana drawn, with the others beside him. Kill them all. Leave no survivors. Kisame grinned. I'm going to enjoy this, he said as he tightened his hold on Samehada. With the smoke still enveloping their enemy, they had the element of surprise. Ghost, who had only limited experience with chakra detection, could barely make out the enemy because of the mass of chakra signatures. He focused his attention on the closest one and sprinted towards the person and stabbed in what he presumed to be the man or woman's stomach. He focused on the next chakra signature and planted his fist in the man's face, feeling his nose break. The hunter followed up with his katana, stabbing the person in the face. Get out of the smoke, I'm preparing a futon jutsu, Ghost told his squad mates through his headset as he jumped out of the smoke. Jiraiya jumped out first, followed by Kisame and Itaka. Futon, de Tapa, Ghost shouted after forming the necessary hand signs. The jutsu blew not only the remaining smoke away but also any enemies that were caught by surprise. Nice job, and Ghost, Jiraiya said, correcting his slip-up. Ghost reached for his katana, which he had thrown on the ground before. Our clones are up next. Itaka nodded and signaled the clones. The clones burst from their cover and ran straight towards the new group of reavers. Kisame grinned like a madman and followed in the clones' footsteps, with Ghost, Itaki and Jiraiya closely behind. Ghost looked from left to right. Their clones were stretched in a long line, trying to halt as much of their enemy's movement as possible. Throw your shuriken. As ordered. All the clones threw their shuriken. Look at that, Jiraiya shouted. Not finished yet. Itaka. Phase 2. I'm ready. They both simultaneously formed the necessary hand signs. Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, pouring enough chakra in the ninjutsu, they managed to multiple the kunai thrown by their clones as well, even if it was to a lesser extent. The shuriken multiplied in the hundreds and closed in on their targets fast. The reavers who saw the attack coming were prepared and were either countering with their own throwing knives or were preparing futon jutsus. However, their preparations weren't quite enough and a lot of the shuriken still hit a lot of their targets. Bodies falling to the ground. Screams of pain and anger filled the forest. Ghost motioned with his hand for Kisame to move. All right. Time for close combat. Let's move. The four shinobi joined the fast diminishing group of clones who, after throwing their shuriken, were moving in for close combat. Stepping on a small rock, Ghost jumped over one of the incoming katon jutsu that were coming their way. He glanced to his right and saw Itaka countering the fire jutsu with one of his own, only more massive in scale. From the corner of his eyes he saw three reavers sprinting towards him, weapons drawn, holding his katana in front of him in a defensive stance. He motioned with his other hand to aggravate them, hoping that they would make a mistake. The first reaver who reached him slammed his own sword into that of Ghost's. He let himself fall to his knees, but still applying pressure on Ghost's blade. It was then that the second reaver used his companion's back as support to jump over him and landed straight within Ghost's defense. Kuso. Ghost cursed and had to release his hold on his katana to quickly jump out of their reach. Futon, Kazekiri no Jutsu. Ghost jerked his head to the left and noticed his third opponent. Ducking out of the way, he barely managed to dodge the attack. Got you, one of the reavers shouted as he made a stabbing motion, intent on piercing Ghost's right eye. Ghost rolled out of the way, grabbing a kunai from his pouch while doing so. He used a handstand to flip himself onto his feet and blocked the incoming reaver's sword. Seeing an opening, he grabbed the man by his throat and tore it apart with his claw. "You'll pay for that, you bastard," the female Reaver of the three-man squad screamed and attacked him head-on. "Don't," her remaining squad mate shouted. She ignored him and drew her own blade. Ghost smirked and laced his kunai with his futon element. He closed the distance between the two and slammed his kunai into her sword, cutting through it like butter. Seeing her shock written all over her face, he used it to his advantage and rammed his kunai exactly where her heart was. Her look became that of pure terror before her eyes became unfocused and closed them. Ghost gave the woman who was as good as dead a shove and she fell to the ground. With only one Reaver remaining, he turned towards him, whom in return had followed the death of his teammate with cold calculated eyes. However, before the former Konaha shinobi could attack, a new group of attackers came to rushing in. "Crap," he muttered as he quickly picked up his katana from the ground. With Jiraiya kneed his opponent in the stomach and finished him with a kick in the man's face. Noticing three more enemies closing in, he weaved through a few hand seals. Katon, Indan. A flame bullet roughly the size of a human flew towards the three Reavers. "Too easy, old man," shouted one of them and dodged it without too much trouble. "This is too easy." Jiraiya barked with laughter. Two small rocks disappeared in a puff of smoke, revealing two Jiraiya clones. They silently made their way to two of Jiraiya's assailants. Once within arm's reach, they grabbed them by the head and snapped it effortlessly. The remaining Reaver noticed his companions weren't behind him anymore. He stopped and turned around. "Now, it's 3 against 1 in my favor," Jiraiya said. The Reaver scoffed. "Do you really think I can't beat you without them? They were mere pawns. They are easily replaced. I am a holder, I can kill you without any problems." Jiraiya heard the change in his voice. "I thought that they merge with their demons and that they become one. Then how come he changes now?" Jiraiya looked at his lower arm and saw it had turned into a claw of sorts, resembling Naruto's. The sage then started grinning like an idiot. "Well then. It's unfortunate for you that I am the gallant sage of Mount Myaboku. I'm the great toad hermit, loved by the women and feared by my enemies. The name's Jiraiya." The Reaver looked at him like he was an idiot. He rubbed his forehead and unsheathed his sword. "Well then, gallant Jiraiya, let's see who's the better fighter." Jiraiya stiffened for a moment but quickly rolled out of the way, barely dodging the incoming blade. Jiraiya retaliated with a ninjutsu. Ranjashigami no Jutsu. His hair extended in the form of a lion's mouth and quickly made its way to his opponent. Initially surprised by the unorthodox attack, the Reaver overcame his surprise quickly and dodged out of the way and used Flash Step to give the Sannin a blow to the face. Although familiar with the Flash Step concept, Jiraiya didn't have time to block the blow and took it head-on. Jiraiya flew a couple of meters through the air before smashing against a large tree. Shaking his head, he stood up and looked around, looking for his opponent and ignoring the large battle around him. Jiraiya twirled around and started sprinting, trying to lure his attacker out, occasionally jumping out of the way of a random Reaver trying to use the Sannin's distraction against him, only to be killed seconds later by one of the many clones. Sensing killing intent targeted at him, he dove to the ground barely in time to dodge the large cleaver that was hurled his way. "Not a second time, gallant Jiraiya," the holder roared as he jumped from one of the trees with his sword high above his head, the tip of his sword aimed downwards. Jiraiya remained on the ground, his exposed back to his incoming attacker. Waiting until the last possible second, he stayed that way. The Reaver smirked in arrogance, knowing he had this in the bag. He swung his sword down, trying to pierce Jiraiya's back. Jiraiya abruptly turned around, revealing his Raise-Non in his hand. He slammed his blue orb into his attacker's stomach, causing him to fly back the same way as he came charging in. "Strikey!" Jiraiya shouted and pulled himself off the ground before jumping into the fray of fighters. With Kisame jumped over his opponent and turned around, aiming his massive partial revealed sword and shredded his enemy to pieces. He looked to the mass of bodies and shook his head before grabbing a random Reaver who tried to pass him by the throat and slammed him in the ground. Kisame turned around, noticed a large group of enemies massing, trying to get through the thin line of clones. He tightened his grip on Samehada and started sprinting, which followed up with a chakra-enhanced jump. Closing in on the group fast, he aimed the end of Samehada on said group, indicating his beloved sword what the plan was. Feeling his sword shudder with excitement, he grinned as well. Within reach. He slammed his sword in the ground, causing a chakra shockwave to be released by his massive sword. This caused the group of reavers to be launched from the ground, leaving them wide open for Kisame. The Akatsuki agent started twirling around with same hata in his hand, shredding everyone to pieces within his range. This is too easy, Kisame said to no one as he stretched the muscles in his arms and neck. Who's next? That would be me. Kisame casually turned around with his chakra addicted resting on his shoulder. It's not my thing to converse with dead people, so let's get this going. Not waiting for a response, Kisame charged, his fist cocked back. But before he could land a blow, the demon holder disappeared in a flash and appeared behind Kisame and jackhammered him into the ground. Kisame kicked back, giving him a momentary opening to go to a safe distance, which he took immediately. Kisame grunted as he spat out a mouthful of blood. Not bad, but you're forgetting something. The reaver scoffed. And what's that? Kisame smirked. My sword. Same Hata took that as his cue to attack and fully unwrapped in an instant by destroying the bandages. He then bit the reaver in his leg, not only wounding him but also draining him of his chakra. The man groaned in pain. What is this? Kisame appeared before him and rammed his hand through the reaver's chest, straight where his heart was. You never should have come here. Did you really think we would bow just like the other countries did? This is the shinobi world. Our world, not you or anyone else will take that from us. See confidence, the man managed to stutter as black spots starting to fill his vision. Kisame barked with laughter. The shinobi world can only be destroyed by other shinobi, and you reaver garbage aren't one of us. With that, Kisame threw him on the ground and locked onto his next target before grabbing his beloved sword. With Inari. Inari swallowed nervously as he listened to the numerous explosions that occurred in the forest. This is crazy. Nawi nodded as he watched the bright lights of the jutsus that were being used. I've lived through one shinobi world war, but I've never would have imagined that some foreign force would invade us and to try and slaughter us all. One of his men nodded in agreement. His voice was cut off by an extremely loud explosion followed by a few lesser ones. Do you think we stand a chance? He repeated. Of course we do. Inari answered without hesitation. Nawi kept silent. Inari ignored it and turned to the darkening sky. This is going to be a problem if they continue to attack throughout the night. You can bet your ass that they will do just that. One of the samurai said. All we have to do is to keep them occupied for as long as possible. Konaha reinforcements aren't far out. Nawi told Inari and the rest of the men that were listening. Nawi glanced at Inari and noticed the nervous look on his face. You okay, kid? He softly asked. Inari swallowed and nodded. Just a bit nervous. One of the samurai slapped him on the shoulders. Believe me, you'll no longer feel that way once you're in the middle of it. Shut up. Inari grumbled. Another explosion shook the ground, and after that it became deadly quiet. The murmuring of the men on the walls fell silent, and they anxiously waited with their weapons at the ready for any sign of ally or enemy. The first one that burst through the tree line was Ataka, clutching his arm, closely followed by Kisame. Moments later, Ghost and Jiraiya came running through the tree line, throwing Konaha with exploding tags everywhere. Someone shouted to open the gate, and seconds later the four-man squad entered the village. Nawi jumped down to greet them as well as a squad of medics. How did it go? Jiraiya was the one who spoke up. Well, they're still there, but their numbers are severely reduced by the traps and our clones. And not to forget Kisame with his water jutsus. Nawi nodded. Let's get to the walls, they'll be here any second. Ghost, Jiraiya and Kisame followed Nawi. I'll join you in a moment, Itaka said as he took off his Akatsuki cloak for the medics to take care of his wounds that were inflicted on him moments earlier. Ghost gave a wave as acknowledgement. XXX. Inari noticed the newcomers and gave them some space. So how tough are they? Kisame quirked an eyebrow. Tough enough. Midget. And why the hell are you here? Shouldn't you be somewhere with those annoying civilians? Don't call me a midget, you blue-skinned fish. Ghost smothered his laugh with a cough. Kisame's eyes twitched and took a threatening step forward. What did you say? Inari's eyes fearfully darted to Ghost, who remained impassive. Why you heard me? Why shouldn't I be allowed to fight? I'm 2 years older than most genin. Kisame merely humphed and focused on the forest ahead. Suddenly the forest was filled once again with explosions. Ghost grabbed his hood and jerked it back, revealing his blonde hair and blue eyes. The rest of his face was covered with a face mask. Inari looked at him with wide eyes. The man looked so familiar. Ghost noticed Inari looking at him and smiled. He gave Inari a wink before extending his fist. Inari kept staring. Is it really him? He then noticed Ghost's fist. Inari reached out with his own trembling fist and did the only thing that came to his mind, he bumped fists with the man. Satisfied? Ghost nodded and focused his attention back on the forest. "En Naruto?" Inari whispered. Ghost gave him another wink. "Not now." "Gaki." Inari opened and closed his mouth. Oddly resembling a guppy fish. He had so many things he wanted to say, to suffocate him with a hug. But it seemed that now just wasn't the time for such things. He merely nodded. Ghost leaned forward with squinted eyes. He had taken off his glasses the moment night fell. "They're here. It would be wise if we separated across the wall. It's clear we are the most capable fighters here," Itaka said as walked up the stairs that was attached to the wall. "Agreed. I'll stick here, make sure that the gate doesn't fall," Ghost offered. The three others nodded and split up. They waited for a couple of minutes which felt like hours. It was quiet and the defenders didn't like it one bit. "It's time. Clones, you know what to do," Ghost shouted over his shoulder, startling a few men. "What are you talking about?" Inari asked. "They've been silent for too long," Ghost trailed off as he looked in the sky. "That isn't good." Inari looked at him with a questioning gaze before following Ghost's eyes. His eyes widened in fear. Oh my god. The sky was filled with huge flame balls that quickly made their descent towards the village. They must have used catapults to launch those flaming objects into the air. Nawi shouted. "Take cover!" Ghost shouted as he grabbed Inari by the back of his neck and pushed him to the ground. As Ghost took a crouching position, the flaming objects crashed in the village, destroying whole buildings at once. Some of those objects which revealed to be flaming rocks also hit the wall which remained intact due to the clones. But the samurai on top weren't that lucky and were killed instantly. Other rocks merely slammed into the ground doing no substantial damage. Inari looked up and to the many burning buildings inside the village. "The village is burning," he screamed and scrambled to get up. "It can be rebuilt." "Gaki. Be lucky that no one was in one of those buildings," Ghost told him as he stood up as well. "What is that?" One of the samurai pointed to the sky before a frightening deafening roar ripped through the air. Ghost and Nawi looked to the dark sky once more. "Kuso." Ghost cursed before backflipping off the wall and landing on the market ground behind him. "Kuki Yos no Jutsu," Ghost shouted, biting his thumb and forming the necessary hand seals beforehand. The large cloud of smoke that had appeared dissipated quickly, revealing three large hawks. "What can we do for you, Ghost-sama?" "Noden. You remember me telling about the unknowns that were going to attack us? They are here and they have launched an air assault. I could use your assistance," Ghost told with a small bow. Noden turned his gaze to the sky looking towards the dark beasts which were barely noticeable. "We'll fight for you. But those beasts? I don't know what they are." "I don't know either, I've never seen anything like it," Ghost answered truthfully. Noden spread his wings. "We'll try to keep them off your backs. As long as you make sure that no one else interferes." And with that he took to the sky. Ghost nodded and jumped back on the wall, joining Inari and Nawi. Another terrifying roar cut through the air, instilling fear in the samurai whose eyes darted from the left to the right. Ghost turned to Nawi. "You have to keep the men focused. Reavers enjoy the sight of fear and always use it." Nawi nodded and spoke up. "My fellow samurai, I can see the fear in your eyes. I would be lying if I wasn't terrified myself. But this is not the time to show it to our enemies." Nawi glanced at Inari before looking back at his men who were all lined up on the wall and on the ground behind it. "These monsters will take everything you hold dear if we don't hold the line. They will kill every man, woman and child of Nami no Kuni if we don't hold them here." He looked at his fellow samurai whom's resolve strengthened and fear disappeared. Will you hold the line? He shouted. Shouts from all of his men erupted that broke the chains of fear. Even the growls and roars hardly had any effect. Nawi nodded approvingly. The radio crackled before Jiraiya's voice came through the static hate to break it. But we have movement in the forest. Ghost narrowed his eyes before a look of disbelief crossed his face. That's a lot. Several hundreds of men came breaking through the forest line and started charging the wooden wall. Brace yourselves. Nawi shouted and unsheathed his katana, quickly lacing it with chakra. Ghost. Inari and the rest of the samurai unsheathed their weapons as well before falling into a fighting stance. The reavers, not slowing down a bit, used chakra to jump on the wall, right into the waiting swords of the defenders of Nami no Kuni. Chapter 14, Nami no Kuni Part 3. Previously on I Will Become a Ghost. Ghost narrowed his eyes before a look of disbelief crossed his face. This is not good. Several hundred men came breaking through the forest line and started charging the wooden wall. Brace yourselves. Nawi shouted and unsheathed his katana, quickly lacing it with chakra. Ghost. Inari and the rest of the samurai unsheathed their weapons as well before falling into a fighting stance. The reavers, not slowing down a bit, used chakra to jump on the wall, right into the waiting swords of the defenders of Nami no Kuni. Ghost held his katana tightly in both hands. He figured that they would use chakra to jump over or on the wall. But to jump straight into the awaiting blades of the samurai wasn't what he expected them to do. Ghost's first opponent jumped in front of him, inches away from the wooden spikes that stuck above the wall, giving them some sort of cover. The blonde hunter stabbed him through one of his lungs before throwing him over the spikes and into the mass of enemies below who were trying to break through. Looking around, he noticed that all the samurai who were on the wall were in a struggle trying to defeat their foe. Ghost knew that they had the upper hand for now. They had more men on the wall and only few reavers could land without getting killed straight away. But that would not last long. So they had to make it count. Clashing blades with another reaver, he glanced towards Inari from time to time. He wouldn't let the kid die. Not while he was around. Inari for his part did well, considering it was a reaver he was fighting against. Making a large gash on his opponent's chest, he quickly focused on the other who had taken his place. Ghost ducked underneath the slash and planted his own blade inside his chest. The blonde noticed Inari had just defeated his opponent but was now overwhelmed by the second one. He quickly reached for a handful of shuriken and threw it at the woman's exposed back. Inari nodded his thanks as the women slumped to the ground. Ghost merely turned and engaged the next of what seemed an endless wave of enemies. Inari followed his example and helped out one of his fellow samurai against a particular strong reaver. He swung his sword at the back of the reaver, making a deep and large cut. The reaver in return screamed and kicked Inari in the stomach. He focused his attention back to his former opponent. The samurai in return used that moment to lace his blade with chakra. He slammed his blade against that of the reaver who held it horizontally, cutting clean through not only his opponent's blade but also his shoulder. Inari stood up after the kick and noticed that his fellow samurai had already defeated his opponent and that he was already fighting the next one. Inari followed his example and tried to help out his fellow samurai where he could. Itaka weaved through the enemies, killing them without too much trouble. The enemy may have come in vast numbers. Skilled they were not. If they were to be compared with shinobi, they would have been Chunin level at the most. Itaka disarmed a reaver that had landed gracefully on the wall. With his Sharingan activated, Itaka easily evaded the thrown punch and retaliated by stabbing him in the chest twice. Itaka made a couple of hand signs and then aimed to the ground below the wall, where the enemies were massing together, trying to get through to the wall. Katon, Gokakyo no Jutsu. The fireball quickly made its way to army below and slammed into them, burning many and causing mass disarray. Itaka gave a small grunt when someone used his moment of inattentiveness to their advantage and stabbed the Uchiha with a knife in his back. Itaka elbowed the woman in the face, breaking her nose. He then twirled around and with his flat hand he slammed it against her nose again. He followed up by grabbing her by the head and kneed her in the face. He dropped her to the ground and slammed the heel of his foot in back of her head, breaking her skull. Noticing one of the reavers trying to finish off one of the samurai, Itaka merely tackled him to the ground and reached inside his robe for a kunao to finish him off. It was at that moment that someone came flying in with two outstretched legs and kicked Itaka off the wall and into one of the stalls on the market below. Itaka slowly got to his knees and looked with narrowed eyes towards the newcomer. The newcomer grabbed the reaver Itaka tried to kill and pulled him back to his feet. "You piece of garbage. Look at your surroundings before attacking." He pushed the man away. Itaka jumped on one of the buildings that separated the market from the wooden wall. "I was wondering when someone with real fighting abilities would join us on the wall." The reaver spat on the ground. "Don't try and be courageous. I can smell your fear." Itaka gave a chuckle. "And a very odd one at that. You smell my fear? You're not even worth my time. You're a hypocrite." The holder's left eye twitched. "Not worth your time? A hypocrite? I'll cut you open and rip your organs out." "I very much doubt that." Itaka held up his left arm and motioned with his hand. 3 samurai came from behind and pierced the holder with their chakra-enhanced blades, killing him instantly. Itaka nodded towards the men and jumped back on the wall. XXX. Couple of hours later. Nightfall. Kakashi and the group of shinobi the size of 2 platoons were closing in on Nami no Kuni fast. Akashi couldn't help but wonder what they would find. The fight against the Reaver all those weeks ago in the arena didn't help him prepare one bit. Sasuke beside him jumped from tree to tree fully focused on the path ahead. Sasuke Uchiha. From the most loved genin to one of the most hated in a span of little less than a year. His attempted betrayal had caused a lot of commotion from the shinobi that resided within Konaha. Reinstating Sasuke had caused quite the uproar. One he would never forget. It seemed that a lot weren't really happy with the Hokage's decision and forgivingness. But what was most surprising was the impact Naruto had made when he abandoned them. The kid that had defeated Gaara of the Sand and in doing so had probably saved the village. So when word got out that Naruto had left the village, they all started wondering what the hell was wrong with the genin nowadays. They never found out about the chakra seal they tried to put upon Naruto. "Ma. Sasuke, what's up with the serious look on your face?" Kakashi asked. Sasuke focused his gaze on Kakashi. "I'm thinking about the fight in the arena. Those 2 reavers there were strong. They cut our jounin who tried to attack down without any trouble. Sending 2 platoons to assist in a country that is already lost seems hopeless to me." Kakashi held up a finger. "You're missing the point. Our group isn't here to repel any invasion force. It's merely to delay them while we set up defenses at the border." Sasuke merely grunted in response. Kakashi noticed movement. As did his fellow comrades. They jumped down and noticed that they were civilians. The gray-haired Umbu stepped forward when he noticed that the daughter of Tajuna was walking up front. "Tsunami. Did everyone manage to evacuate from Nami no Kuni?" Tsunami raised an eyebrow questioningly. "Who are you?" Kakashi mentally slapped himself in the face. He grabbed his Umbu mask he was wearing and attached it to his belt. "Remember now, Kakashi-san," she said with a neutral tone. "We all managed to escape. Thanks to your 4-man group." Kakashi knew the woman would never forgive him. Neither would she ever forgive Sakura and Sasuke for what they had done. "I know you're mad at me. But this isn't the time. We're heading to Nami no Kuni. Can you give me any information on what's happening? There are 120 samurai stationed in our village to provide us with the security we lacked. Nothing much else other than that your group is reinforcing the wall with that chakra trick of yours." Tajuna spoke up as he pushed himself through the mass of civilians. "That will stall at the most. But a good strategy." Shikamaru joined in. Kakashi nodded. "Well, at least we won't be alone in this fight." Kakashi turned his attention back to Tajuna. "Tajuna. When did you leave the village?" "About 4 hours ago. We left when they were almost reaching the shore." Kakashi thought for a second. "That means that we're still a good hour and a half out." "Tajuna. Keep heading for the Konaha, they will provide you with shelter." "Thanks for the offer. Good luck, Kakashi." Kakashi signaled and the shinobi force jumped back into the trees and resumed their track. XXX. Night slowly descended, but the enemy showed no sign of backing down or taking a rest. Ghost cut off one of his enemy's arms and kicked him off the wall and into the street below. He breathed heavily. He was running low on chakra and his clones were slowly starting to disappear because they were out of chakra. He tackled another enemy trying to pass him and quickly finished him off with a blade in his chest. He looked around and noticed that slowly more and more reavers were coming on the wall. He then glanced to Inari, who was breathing heavily as well. Even more so than him. The kid had some skill he'd give him that, but he still had a lot to learn, and if he hadn't intervened from time to time he'd most probably be dead. Suddenly the wall shook and he almost fell to his knee. What the f-? Another tremor shook the fighters, causing some to fall. It was then that a samurai yelled, "They're trying to destroy the gate." Ghost looked over the wall and to the edge of the forest. He saw a large earth dragon spitting out large rocks towards the gate. That looks a lot like the Doryudan, but that technique uses mud and not rocks. Ghost shut his eyes as another of his clones dissipated and sent his memories to the real Ghost. He reopened them and reached for his headset. "Attack it. I'm running out of clones. We're also about to lose the gate. They're assaulting it with jutsu that looks like Doryudan." He got no answer. Ghost was about to try again when a huge explosion took place. He jerked his head to the direction the explosion was and knew right away that Itaka was right there. "We got incoming!" Someone shouted and pointed to the sky. Ghost looked up and saw a metallic spiky ball closing in fast. "Get off the wall," he roared and quickly grabbed Inari, throwing him in the alley behind the wall. Inari quickly scrambled to his feet and ran towards the market. Ghost looked to the spiky ball again. Not going to make it? He tried anyway and jumped. A mere second later the metallic object impacted against the wall and went off, causing an enormous explosion similar to the explosion earlier. Caught in the blast, Ghost was thrown through the already ruined roof of a small home behind the wall. Nawi, who had jumped off earlier, saw Ghost crashing through the building and feared the worst. He looked to where the spiky ball had blown up and noticed that a large part of the wall was gone. "Form a line and defend the wall. Don't let anything get through." A group of samurai who were standing behind him quickly sprinted to the gap, swords tightly held in their hands. Nawi knew they were running low on men. They had started off with 120 men, 80 of which were stationed on the wall and 40 men on standby. They were now down to 68. Nawi looked to his right and saw that the older man, named Jiraiya, came sprinting to him. "What's the situation on the wall, Jiraiya-sama?" Jiraiya came to a halt in front of Nawi. "It's going all right for the moment. I thought we lost Itaka with the first explosion, but he reported in just a moment ago." Nawi nodded. "Good. Things would have turned bad indeed if we lost him." Jiraiya gave a dry chuckle. "Even with Itaka, things aren't looking too bright. What is taking your friends so long?" Inari asked with a bitter tone as he joined in the conversation, starting to feel the after effects of long chakra usage. "It won't be long. We just have to hold on," Jiraiya told the boy just as the sound of another explosion filled the air. "Let's focus on the fight. We should pull all our men away from the wall and fight here in the streets. They wouldn't dare to use those explosives when their own men are among them. I very much doubt they would stay their hand because they got some of their own men in the area. But we haven't got a lot of options left, so we'll go with your plans." Nawi started giving orders to his men through his headset. "Kisame. Pull back from the wall and regroup on th." He was interrupted when the sound of wood splintering shot through the air. "Regroup on the streets, we'll continue fighting in the village. And hurry it up because the gate has fallen." Samurai everywhere ran for the market and regrouped there, jumping of the wall or pulling back from the gate. Itaka showed up as well, looking a little worse for wear. His Akatsuki robe had scorch marks and tears in it. His face was covered in dirt and blood. Kisame showed up as well, having a few shallow cuts in his robe. "For shinobi wannabe, you samurai aren't half bad." A few samurai glared at that moment and some of the others cursed him. "Kisame, now isn't the times to make enemies. We already have quite enough," Itaka softly said, slightly panting. Kisame glanced around. "Where's the brat?" "Me?" Inari asked, feeling like a kid when he was surrounded by adults everywhere. "Not you, Baka. Where the hell is Ghost?" Kisame snapped. Jiraiya looked around as well. "Where is the idiot gone to now?" Nawi remembered Ghost crashing through a building. "He got caught in the explosion. I don't think anyone would have survived that." Inari started to get worried. Finding out that that man was most likely Naruto was a shock of its own. But he wasn't about to let him go again. "We have to go look for him." Too late, Itaka noted and pointed towards the gate and the wall where a mass of enemies came running at full speed towards them. Prepare yourself. Jiraiya shouted and formed a few hand signs before summoning human-sized toads. Gamakaki was among them. Wearing full battle armor with a short katana in his hand. He looked towards the incoming reavers. So I guess that guy was telling the truth after all. Jiraiya nodded with a serious look on his face. We're waiting for reinforcements from Konaha, but we're running low on men. Could you help out a bit? Gamakaki thought about it for a bit. Nope. Jiraiya face folded. Gamakaki. Just kidding. Where do you want us? Gamakaki chuckled. Defend the northern part of the market. I'll back you up later. Jiraiya ordered and received a nod from Gamakaki. At the same time, more metallic explosives streaked through air. Only smaller in size this time. As they soared through the air, one of the explosives hit an hawk that was trying to fight off the enemy monstrosities, causing the hawk to crash into the village in a ball of fire. The metallic objects blew up at various parts in the village, setting the small town on fire. Inari tried to ignore it all but found that he just couldn't. He looked around and made their way down his face as he saw his hometown go up in flames. The hawks have lost, one of the samurai screamed and pointed to the sky as the hawks either crashed in the village or disappeared in a large cloud of smoke. With the skies now clear, the large beasts that previously had defeated the hawks now headed for the market, letting out a loud roar before they set a group of samurai on fire. Kisame tried to counter their fire attacks with a few water jutsu but was forced to jump away. Oh my god! Those are dragons, someone screamed in horror. That can't be. They don't exist, another shouted, his voice laced with fear. Itaka stood motionless as a dragon landed in front of him. You chose your wrong target, you disgusting beast. He activated his Mangekyo Sharingan and activated Susanoo right away, summoning a skeleton-based Susanoo. Not wasting a moment, he reached out with Susanoo's arm and gripped the snout of the dragon, pulling it close before slamming his free fist on top of the beast's head, slamming it to the ground. He quickly followed up with Amaterasu and set the dragon ablaze. The dragon roared and tried to fly away but crashed to the ground again and didn't get back up. Nawi-san. Focus on the humans. Jiraiya will take care of the beasts. Itaki ordered. Nawi in return nodded and relayed the orders to his men. Jiraiya, I need you to summon the big toads. Those dragons are causing too much damage. I'm on it. Jiraiya's voice crackled through the headset. Moments later, 3 more clouds of smoke filled the ground and revealed 3 large toads. One of them being Gamabunta. Jiraiya. Where are you? You pervert. Gamabunta roared, not appreciating the fact that he was summoned. Now is not the time to complain. Gamabunta. We're having some big problems here. The chief toad looked to the dragon who was rampaging near the eastern wall. Is that a dragon? They were supposed to be extinct. Then how did the reavers get their hands on the dragon summoning contract? Gamabunta didn't respond. We'll discuss this later. For now we have to keep these dragons away from the main defense until Kakashi comes with reinforcements. Jiraiya said as he ducked underneath a throwing knife that came his way. Gamabunta answered by letting out a large puff of smoke he inhaled earlier through his pipe. Ghost. Slowly with his usable arm pushed away the wooden beam that had collapsed on him when he came crashing through the roof earlier. He groaned and pushed another beam away that lay across his legs. He sat up and looked around. The room he was lying in was in ruins. Most of the roof was collapsed around him. Wooden beams that originally supported the roof was scattered around the room. He stood up with another groan and pressed his hand on his left chest before pulling away. His hand was coated in blood. He then reached for his face and noticed a large cut on his cheek that partially cut his face mask. He panted heavily as he slowing stumbled through the house heading for what he assumed the front door. Ignoring the clashing of metal and the deafening roars outside. Using the wall to his right as support, he opened the partially destroyed door. He looked around and saw bodies lying everywhere, with only a small group of samurai left standing, trying to fight off the horde of enemies. Konaha and shuriken flew everywhere, some hitting their targets. He turned to the large beasts fighting against the toads, finally visible through the light of the moon. So they're dragons. But weren't they extinct? An exploding tag landed near him and went off, blasting him against one of the walls of a store. Ghost shook his head and tried to stand up again. With a lot of difficulty he stood up again and breathed in deeply. Itake? You still alive? He asked with an exhausted voice after he reached for his headset. I'm still alive. But for a moment I thought you weren't. Like that's going to happen. Have a promise to keep. He answered as he tried to dust himself off. Which only resulted in wincing because of his chest wound. I forgot about that for a while. So you're still hell-bent on taking us out? Ghost hesitated. Killing Itake might have been on his agenda 7 years ago. But now? No, he couldn't do it, and the Uchiha bastard knew it. He had become a close friend to him, and that was something he treasured dearly. Thought so, he heard Itake say, and he knew that the bastard was smirking right now. Shut up, he grunted before straightening, ignoring the stabbing pain in his chest. Where the hell are Kakashi and his men? Itake answered almost right away. They can't be far out. After you got caught in the blast we decided to pull back from the walls, as you can most likely see. How long have I been out? Ghost asked, glancing to the destroyed gate. Close to an hour. One of the samurai fell to the ground in front of his feet. We have to pull back. We can't hold out any longer. Itake said. Ghost sighed. We can't do that. If we do they'll have no opposition and are free to attack Konaha. We can stall them by blowing up the bridge. Itake offered after a moment of silence. Ghost saw that blonde-haired female reaver came sprinting towards him. He reached for his kunao pouch but noticed that his pouch wasn't there anymore. He then reached for his tontos strapped to his legs and noticed they too were gone. With a groan he ran towards the female with a slight hobble. She threw a fist but Ghost blocked and countered with a fist of his own, catching her right in the face. Ghost jumped back and hastily with his bloodied hand formed a few hand signs. Futon, Kazekiri no Jutsu. A blade of wind made its way to the female reaver and easily cut her in two. Ghost panted in exhaustion. We'll go with that. I'm running low on chakra, and from the looks of it we're running low on men as well. Go give the order. And with that he limped towards the gate. Ghost. Ghost turned around and saw a relieved Inari running over. Before Inari could stop himself he threw himself at Ghost and hugged him. Damn. Naruto, I thought you were dead. Ghost with his one usable arm pushed him away roughly. Inari. Get a hold of yourself. We're pulling back to the bridge. Go down to the headquarters and get some of the heavy exploding tags. We're going to blow up the bridge. Inari, initially shocked by Ghost's behavior, was now gaping. We can't blow up the bridge, it's our village's pride. I don't fucking care. If we don't blow it up we are in some serious trouble. More flaming rocks came crashing into the streets and buildings, destroying and setting everything on fire. Inari wanted to object but decided against it and instead ran towards the headquarters. Stupid kid. Ghost thought with a shake of his head. The remaining samurai broke of their attack and ran towards the gate, stumbling or falling over the dead bodies on the ground. The remaining dragons ripped them apart left and right. Retreat to the bridge. Nawi shouted while ramming his blade through the stomach of one of the reavers that came running at him. He expertly blocked a blade that attacked him from his exposed left side and countered slash of his own that made a large cut of one of the more inexperienced reavers before finishing him off with two more similar attacks. He panted heavily but ignored it and focused on the next opponent that blocked his path to the bridge. You're a fool to stand in our way. Submit to our greater strength and you will find peace in the next life. Nawi's eyes widened in fear. Itake told him about them. Holders. Never engage them alone. He looked around but didn't find any allies. Your comrades have already left. You are alone. The man in front of him said. Knowing he didn't stand a chance he turned to meet his maker. He held his katana in reverse grip and jumped with his blade high above his head. The holder saw the attack coming and easily dodged out of the way and broke the man's kneecap with a kick as he landed. Nawi roared in pain and swung wildly with his blade as he stumbled and fell to the ground. The reaver blocked the attack with his metal gauntlet and with his free hand reached for Nawi's wrist and gave it a twist, breaking it and giving Nawi no other choice than to drop his blade. Knowing you fight against a more powerful opponent you still hold your ground and fight. You people are of a strange sort. Nawi groaned in pain as he cradled his wrist to his chest. Wouldn't you, he hissed. There aren't a lot of men or women that could defeat me. So I can't put myself in your shoes. But enough with the talking. the holder said, and he casually reached for his own blade and stabbed him through the chest right where the heart was. Nawi coughed and he felt himself growing tired. You won't take our home, he slurred before Nawi closed his eyes, never opening them again. The holder turned his attention to the bridge, where the last of the samurai were making their stand. Lasting. Send in everyone. The man named Lasting dropped from one of the roofs and landed beside his comrade. He was wearing dark red robes, very similar to those of the hunters. He had a scar that crossed his left cheek and had a calm, calculated look. He had his long and loose, a bit ruffled, but that fit his whole calm exterior. They are already marching through the gate. What do you want to do with the dragons? Allow them to rest. They've done their job. But tell them that they can expect to be summoned at any moment. With a nod, Lasting left. Ghost walked across the bridge supported by Itaka. A small handful of samurai around him. What do we do? Someone asked. Fear evidently in his voice. We're blowing up the bridge, Itaka said as he put Ghost on the ground. What? No, we can't do that. Nawi and the others might still be alive. Ghost groaned and leaned against the left side of the bridge. If they're not here, then they're dead. Inari, who had just finished setting up the explosives, shook his head fervently. Nawi is too tough to die. He's coming. Kisame, who had his infamous sword leaning on his shoulders, stepped forward. Shut it, brat. If you look towards the village, you can already see reavers marching to the bridge. Inari, who struggled with his emotions, just looked to the other side and walked away. Blow the bridge the moment they're crossing it, Itaka ordered Kisame, who just nodded. Itaka walked over to Ghost and grabbed him by the arm and slung it around his shoulder. Come on, let's go. Ghost nodded and tried to put as much energy into walking on his own. Itaka noticed. Don't do that, Ghost. I got you. Ghost smirked. Don't think for a second that I owe you. Itaka gave a small smile before walking off the bridge and to the edge of the forest. Yes, you do. Screw you, Itaka. Ghost merely grunted. Jiraiya walked up next to Kisame, who held his hand in a seal. Where are those toads of yours? Kisame asked, his eyes never leaving the marching army. Send them back the moment we retreated. They are pretty much useless against dragons. Kisame nodded before opening his mouth. It's time. At that moment, large explosion shook the area and blew a large portion of the bridge apart, killing every reaver who had stood upon it. Triple X. Shikamaru, who landed on one of the tree branches, almost lost his balance as a large explosion took place. Ino landed on a branch below him. Holy shit. That was one big explosion. Kakashi motioned with his hand to keep moving. It didn't take them long to reach the edge of the forest, where a sight of fire and destruction met them. My god. Kakashi, could you be any slower? An exhausted voice said in annoyance. Kakashi looked to where the voice originated and saw Ghost leaning against a tree with his hands in his lap. Kakashi quickly moved to Ghost and crouched down next to him, lifting up his mask. Ghost, what happened? You were supposed to hold the village. Ghost coughed. What happened? I'll tell you what happened. You took too damn long. We didn't stand a chance. Kakashi grabbed him by the arm and helped him up. We came as fast we could. Ghost grabbed his face mask and pulled it down before spitting a mouthful of blood on the ground. Doesn't change the fact that we still lost the village. Shikamaru stepped forward and eyed the hunter. We have to retake it? Ghost chuckled before coughing again. No way in hell that we can take the village back. They've come in force. Their army outmatches our own. Ino joined the small group as well and looked at Ghost, who looked exhausted. You're not looking too good. Maybe you should lie down for a bit. Ghost sneered. I don't need your advice. He limped forward, pushing away Kakashi's offered hand. You got a plan? Kakashi. Kakashi ignored Ino's glare she gave Ghost and nodded. We'll put our men on our forward outpost a few clicks from here. How much further from the outpost is the actual line of defense, Kakashi? Itaki asked as he joined the group. Along with Kisame, Jiraiya and a distraught Inari. Behind them were the few remaining samurai. Around the 10 to 15 miles. So should the forward outpost be attacked, we'll be properly prepared. The silver-haired Umbu answered. Whatever. It took you long enough. Kisame growled. Kakashi glanced at the missing nin who didn't look too worse for wear. He had few tears in his cloak but that was about it. He turned to the men. Grab the wounded. We're moving out. Itaka didn't move. I'm staying for a while longer. I'm going to buy some extra time by channeling my chakra in the water so that if they know how to walk on water they'll just lose their balance. Jiraiya nodded. Don't stay for too long. You don't know what else they might cook up. Ghost signaled Kisame, who walked over and roughly grabbed him by the arm and slung Ghost's arm over his shoulder. To be continued. Hope you enjoyed and maybe subscribe. One shot will be out soon. Hope this multi-hour one can help.